sector, the transit from the tariff to market conditions. So the first thing that we're going to start with our conference, first of all, I would like to remind you some of the technical moments that are required. I would like to remind you that there is the opportunity to change the language channel in order to receive the simultaneous interpretation. Please make sure that you will figure out on the lower panel there is a globe-like sign, and you should choose the language that you would like to speak and the language that you would like to listen to, either English or Ukrainian. And I would like to say that under the coronavirus pandemic, we are holding this conference in online regime, but our studio is located in the center of Kiev and Maidan of Independence in a prestigious business center called Spices. And before we start the conference, I would like to once again welcome our international partners Wind Europe who are supporting our today's event. I would like to thank our main informational sponsor, the West as North and Central Europe Company, and I would like to express our gratitude to the members of the Ukrainian Wind Energy Association, the company UDP Renewables for organizing this conference. I would like to thank our informational partners as well, the Turkey-Ukraine Union of Entrepreneurs and Businessmen, the Professional Association of Environmentalists of Ukraine, the Get Market Informational Platform, and the Energy Reform and Electricity Resources, and Expro Consulting. I would also like to state that our today's event is dedicated for searching the new mechanisms for the support and development of the renewables in Ukraine and the wind energy in Ukraine, because the wind energy starting from 2022, the new projects that are going to be built, they will not be able to receive the green tariff, the feed-in tariff. So we need to find the right decision today. We need to use those mechanisms that have already been introduced in the European countries, that have already had the great reception from both the state and investors. And we should find the formula that is going to be the most suitable for all of the stakeholders, whether it will be the auctions, whether it will be the contracts for difference, whether it will be the increase of the tax on the CO2 emission for the enterprises that emits the CO2. But anyway, we have to find the system in place. We really would like to know how the representatives of the state sector, what do they think, how do they see the development of the wind energy sector? Unlike yesterday, today we're going to have the representatives of the state structures who are building the policies in the wind energy and the renewables, and they're going to be the new actors there, the new actors on the market who have built already the wind station and who have already have the big projects implemented that are going to be launched after the uh, outbursting of the green tariff. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to pass the floor to our moderator, Maxim Sosoyev, who is department of the international company Dantas and who is also the member of the board of the Wind Association. Good morning, Adri. Can you hear me properly? Yes. Okay, great. So, while we were working in this sector of the wind energy and while we have been supporting many projects in the recent years, the projects of the solar and wind projects for more and more time, I have understood that the regulatory base is a very important background for the development of the wind energy. Right now, as Andriy has already stated, we have seen the final projects that have been launched in the framework of the green tariff, of the feed-in tariff. The thing is, and the question rises, is what's going to be held next. We have some additional opportunities, like, for example, the auctions, maybe the corporate PPIs, or any other forms of support. And we're going to be discussing these issues today. Moreover, we should keep in mind that there are the mechanisms of support and there are also the additional permittary system that is working in for the sector, and this they can both support the development of the project and create additional obstacles for the projects. And I also would like to say that it's not only the regulations that we have to consider, we need to integrate the wind energy, the solar energy that has been created from the renewables. We have to integrate it and connect it to the system. And we're going to check out what is the status is currently and where we're going to with the integration of the renewables into the overall system. Up till now, in our session, we have very interesting speakers, the representatives of both the state institution and state enterprises, the one that define the development of the industry. And I believe that is going to be a very important discussion held. So please make sure you ask your questions in the chat. And right after all of our speakers are going to present, we're going to have the Q&A and we'll be able to cover the questions that will be set. So let us keep in mind that we have scheduled to follow 10 minutes for each of the presenter, and the first person that I would like to introduce you with is Vyacheslav Shapovalov, the Deputy Minister for Integration of the Temporarily Occupied Territories of Ukraine. And Shapovalov, Mr. Shapovalov, he's going to be talking about the very important issues, and I believe that it's a very important issue for Ukraine, the role of the wind technologies and how the wind technologies and the industry overall can help to reintegrate the temporarily occupied territories. So please, Vyacheslav, the floor is yours. Yes, thank you very much, Maxim. Good day, dear colleagues, dear friends. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you at the second day of our online conference. The title of this conference is very important and it has been setting out to the international trend. So basically the production of the energy and using the renewables, wind, sun and water. An additional attention from the side of the European community in the environmental issue, which are sensitive issues, and it also includes the high standards while producing the electric and while producing electricity. The transition from green tariff to the market tariff is important, understanding the overall trends that the production of the wind energy has to support the development of the economy as the cheap resource, while cheap resource for production of energy. Understanding all of that, the Ministry of Reintegration is fully supporting those initiatives and those trends. And that is why, with our collaboration in the east of Ukraine, in Donetsk region, the Wind Farm Company has been implementing and launching the projects on constructing the wind energy station of 800 megawatts overall capacity. The implementation of this project will help us to provide the need for the electricity, and once again, according to the market tariff, for all of the spheres of the economy in the midterm perspective. It will create additional jobs. It will increase the income for the local budgets of all levels. And this approach is the one that we had used during the development of the strategy for the priority development for Donetsk and Lugansk regions that has been approved December last year by the Cabinet of Ministries of Ukraine. The concept is The concept is in consolidating the efforts of all of the state institutions to bring peace and coherence to the eastern regions by building the wind stations as well. In the framework of this strategy, it is presupposed we're going to be using the new approaches of engaging the investment for the business making, which presupposes creating the unified venture fund for the investing of the project, creating the systems of the international arbitrary courts for all of the costs to be covered and insurancing the risks. It all should influence positively the investment attractiveness for the eastern regions. It should also engage the new partners that will join us in peacemaking. Having this opportunity, I would like to thank all of our international partners and partners overall, the ones that have supported Ukraine in the military aggression of the Russian Federation. I strongly believe that the implementation of our project is going to be productive. Thank you very much. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Дуже дякую вам
Thank you for your, thank you, Vyacheslav.
за говорення.
And I do believe that for markets overall, it is important to listen to those messages that the state institutions are supporting the development of the wind energy and the wind industry. We have heard that there's going to be some new mechanisms created on the specific territories for stimulating the new initiatives.
Це дуже
And I believe that this is an important
для
step
реінтеграції
for the
тих територій,
reintegration of the
які
territories as well, the territories that have been
Дякую.
under the influence of military actions as well. Thank you, Vyacheslav. So let us then shift to our next speaker, and I have the honor to welcome Mr. Konstantin Huro, the acting head of the State Agency of Energy Efficiency. Um, Basically, at this position, Konstantin has already been since 25th of June, so for quite a long time, and he's already had a chance to initiate some important projects, in my opinion, again, as an expert of this market. But it has been the important ideas, and I think that what he's going to cover in his presentation, this is the questions of the energy metering and some updated mechanisms like net billing systems. We have also participated, and I has participated in our association, has participated in discussing the issues of the certificates of origins and the guarantees of origins. We have been the issues of insurances from the energy sector and the further on development of the energy efficiency. For example, the program of the energy efficiency after that. And basically, Konstantin has been working in the State of Energy Efficiency Agency since 2015. That has tremendous experience. And today we would like to talk. And okay, we're not going to have the green tariff, and we can go into the questions on the auctions and other mechanisms are going to be discussed with the regulator. And we would really like to know the transition to the more markets mechanisms, the issues of the net billing and net metering for the distributed generation. So please, Konstantin, can you tell us on the initiatives about what is being discussed and what is being offered? Maxim, Andriy, first of all, it's a pleasure for me to have this really high evaluation from you. If I may, I will start the evaluation. Can you please tell me, can you see the slides? Yes, we can see the slides. So, okay, understanding the time that I have, only 10 minutes, so maybe we can shift to the presentation itself and the overall things. So Ukraine is basically the country that is now following the decarbonization of economy and that is now following the green course as well. Speaking on the international frame, Ukraine has signed the Ukraine-Paris Agreement that presupposes the decrease of the temperature lower than 2 degrees of Celsius centigrade. And Ukraine has signed the association agreements between Ukraine and European Union, which presupposes that we'll be implementing the energy directives in the renewable energy as well. And we all know about the European Green Deal that actually created the overall frame for the development of Europe till 2050. What can we do? What can we say about our liabilities in the framework of those directives? In the implementations of those directives and implementations of the first energy package, it is being said that it is important for the citizens and the small energy producers to participate in the energy transition. We have all seen that in the recent year, we have all seen 2020, and we know that the big generation is important, but there are some challenges on balancing the grid as well. So we understand that the dispersed generation is one of the perspectives for the development of the energy sector of Ukraine. That's first of all. And secondly, we understand that we should be looking for the alternative cases to the green tariff in order to support the development of the sector. Speaking on the statistics, and one of the most important documents and the key documents for us is the energy strategy till 2035, when we would like to see that 25% of the renewables in overall energy balance, in overall energy mix. And according to our evaluations in the electricity generation, we have slightly more than 13% of renewables overall. Speaking about the other statistics as well, because in the recent 5, 6 years, the green energy has engaged more than 8 billion euro. We have we have built more than 8.5 gigawatts of capacities, and the wind generation is now the second after the solar generation, with the overall capacity 1.3 gigawatts of installed capacities. But this is the big project, and as it has been said, there are big initiatives that the consumers that now have the opportunity to have to participate in this energy system. And I've already have said that within the prospects we have the wind and solar stations, but there are fewer of the wind stations in the households, and you know that each of the households can install up till the 30 kilowatts of the installed capacity station, and they also can sell the energy with a really high green feed-in tariff. The overall capacities between the green energy, you do not need to receive any licenses to that. So it's kind of easy to do. Right now, we have around 30,000 households that have installed the solar PV stations. We had only 3,000 around 3 years ago. So we see the market growing, but we have to keep in mind that we have 6.5 million of those private households overall. Then, speaking about the other consumers and the producers, basically the prosumers of the energy, we have a lot of small enterprises that have the warehouses and storages that are installing the solar or wind stations for to cover their own needs. Right now, the situation shows that the wind station or the solar stations have been set for the lowest level of consumption because there is no opportunity to outback the overall energy that is being produced. And we know that currently you don't have some places to store the additional energy that is being generated, or we are providing the system of the net energy metering. So this is why I'm really grateful to Maxim and Andriy for being the participants of our working group, for helping us to work on the net energy metering. How net energy metering works. There are two main ways, net energy metering and net energy billing, and I'm going to tell you about both of that. But if speaking about the international experience, we should not think that this is a wheel that we have reinvented. No, the system has been working for already 70 countries all over the world. And the first tryouts have been launched in 1979. Those were two pilot projects in the US and in Massachusetts state. Right now, it's been covered by 70 countries. As it has already been said, there are two important mechanisms, the net energy metering and net billing. In the essence of it, follows the same principle. So the producers of energy, if they're producing more than they're consuming, they can then upload their additional energy to the grid, and thus they are also possible for them to take some of the take some energy from the grid when it's needed. The net metering says that after you have uploaded additional energy to the grid, then you're going to be out taking this energy for the next day or the next month. But next energy billing says that's basically when you are providing this energy to the network, you are also paying the certain amount of money for the usage of the grid. How the system works. If you're buying the energy, if you know that if you can buy the energy with the RD, then the transmission tariff, then the dissemination channel tariff, so you can get to the tariff that the consumer is going to be able to buy the energy. But when you're providing this energy, when the prosumers, the consumers that can actually produce the electric energy, when they're setting up, the tariff is going to be based with the RD tariff, So the transmission and dissemination will be overall zero because as we know that these components are being paid by the buyer. For this how it can work. So basically, if we're speaking about the market potential, then we can see 350,000 enterprises in Ukraine that are working overall, and there are more than 6.5 million private households if we are saying that. So if we're speaking about this kind of potential of the markets, and if we're setting out this 20% to be used with the system of the 30% of the households, then we see the overall 6.5 billion kilowatts for the private households, and these are going to be the one that are going to be set in the net energy metering. So once again, I understand that this is the potential, then it's not going to happen tomorrow. And And basically, if you're doing it with a simple language, if you are going to provide it without the uh, additional additional power strategies for the consumers, if you're going to provide in the outtakes of the clean energy, this is the investment for the decarbonization, the investment for our energy independence. So that is why this is the idea for us. I do believe that the participants of the markets are going to support us. And additionally, for my presentation, what Maxim has already mentioned, we have been working for the systems of the guarantees and the guarantees. It is one of our advantages because according to the directives and according to the normal logic, every consumer has the right to know what kind of energy they're receiving, whether it's clean or whether it's from the traditional conventional energy sources. And for many people, for many customers and consumers, um, a lot of people are ready to pay for that. A lot of customers are ready to pay for that. And a lot of the consumers and I mean enterprises, they have their own liabilities on decreasing the CO2 emission. It is also in the framework of the European Green Agreement. A lot of enterprises are ready to declare and are ready to pay for the decreasing of the CO2 emissions. So the guarantees of a region is going to provide us the opportunity for transition from using the green tariff because the energy that is going to be produced from the renewables, it can be sold to the market according to the market conditions. And because of toward this process of the energy, there is important document that is required for them is basically the guarantee of origin. So that is why we're currently in discussion with energy community, and we understand that we would like to join the European Energy Hub so that we'll be able to provide the sales and procurement of the guarantees of origins. So there's two initiatives, and I'm really grateful for your attention. So we're always keeping in touch. So thank you very much, Konstantin. I do believe that this direction is very important for the further on development, not only for the renewables and renewable energy in Ukraine, but is important for the development of the overall energy sector in Ukraine. And from my side and the side of the Ukrainian Wind Energy Associations, we're really supporting all of those initiatives. The guarantees of origins is very important as well, especially understanding that in Europe, and we all know now that starting from 2023, we're going to have the carbon border adjustment tax, which is basically is going to have an additional tax that is going to be calculated at the border for the goods and products that have high carbon emissions during the production circle. So thank you very much. We support these ideas. So, okay, thank you very much, dear participants of this event and dear audience. You have this opportunity to pose your questions in the chat. I see there are some questions rising already. We're going to mention those in the end. So please stay with us because we already have some questions for you. Thank you very much. But right now, let us switch to our next speaker, to the two of speakers as far as I can see. So of course we all understand that the further on development of the wind energy isn't possible without the right regulatory base. And basically without having the new approach to the market from the side of the energy regulators. And right now, I do not see this development without introducing the energy regulator. So that is why we have invited the representatives of the National Commission on the Regulations of the Energy and Municipal Utilities so that they would tell us about what is the role of the regulator currently and how do the regulators see the further on development of the renewables in Ukraine. So what is the status quo and what is the next development that should be awaited? We wanted really Mr. Kovalenko to join us, but unfortunately right now he is in another meeting, so we hope that he'll be able to join us later on. But we have now the main expert of the commission. We have Alexander Mikhailovsky, who is the head of the alternative and renewables energy for the Department of the Energy Regulations, and Mr. Viktor Kikoc, who is the head of the Generating Enterprises for the Department of Regulating the Relations in the Energy Sphere. So I would like to pass the floor to you. So please, can you give us an update on the current status? How do you see the development of the renewables, and what are the next mechanisms for its support or for its further development? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. We're pleased to be at this event. And we would like to start with a very brief presentation that we prepared.
Так, видно презентацію?
So yes, you can see the over. Oh yes, we can see the presentation. Okay, so the very brief overview of the renewable sector. In 2020, according to the results of the 2020, you can now see that their overall share of the renewables in the energy production has been 7.4%, and that was the energy and electricity that has been created from the solar station, and 2.3% that was the energy that has been generated by wind. I would like to say that currently we are getting bigger in getting, we are having more and more capacities of the energy provided by wind. And first of all, because the PPIs and the pre-PPIs give us the opportunity to finalize the construction this year and next year for this object that have been launched into development and construction, the pre-PPI are being expired by the end of this year. We also see the overall dynamics of how the capacities have been launched and implemented in 2019. And you can see that in 2019, we had a huge jump in installing new capacities. And for 2021, we can see that there will be the increasing of capacities is expected. If we will speak about this forecast, considering those amalgamations that are going to be completed in 2021 and those PPIs that have been signed beforehand. The forecasted scale for the energy in 2021 are going to be, according to the mixes, is going to be 13,350,000,000 in the overall structure. The average green tariff, and you can see there is the sustainable dynamics for the decrease of the tariffs because we have more and more capacities that are being installed and they are applying for a lower tariff, which is also influences the average tariff after all. And the Ukrainian legislation 810 that has been approved in August 2020 has influenced the average tariff, green tariff as well. So in 2022, we're going to have minus 4.8 billion of savings. The overall net product for the forecast of 2021 is going to be 53 billion hryvnias, and you can see the comparison with 2020, which was 49 billion, and you can see that there is a huge increase, which is basically the structure for the tariff. This has been the service for the Ukrenergo. So this cost of the service itself is the 21.6 billion. So then there are going to be the additional cost for the budget is going to be, according to the legislation at 110, we should here presuppose additional shares 11.5 billion and the limitation 2.4 billions. So we have 53 billions of the overall cost for the money that have to be paid in 2021 for the electricity that has been created from the renewables. And in overall comparisons, month-to-month comparison with 2020, then you can see that there is an increase of capacities. The increase of capacities has decreased because the pre-PPAs are now being expired and there are some projects that haven't been implemented in the right way, and we can see the overall dynamics of the outtake of energy, and we can see that the new projects have not been post out, have not been launched, and we know that the dynamics of the import is going to be increasing this year and next year because many of the objects that have received the green tariff, they are still under the technical assessment, they're still joining the grids. And we're going to see the overall dynamics for the increase of the input to the grid. So as the result of 2022, we're going to pass the limit of 15 billion kilowatt hours, more or less. The comparison for the first quarter of 2020 and the first quarter 2021, again, the average net tariffs and the products overall, the good products overall. These are the calculations for the first quarter. At this graph, you can see the forecasted balance by the Ministry of Energy, and this is basically the real capacities of the electricity provided. So you see there is a slight difference. If we only analyze the first quarter, there is slight difference in numbers and figures, and I do believe that we're going to have this difference throughout the year because we've also modeled it and forecasted. So factually, we're going to have slightly lower capacities. And the wind energy stations, you can see the fact that the factual energy is being created, that is, there is a slight difference from the evaluations and forecast of the ministry. I wanted also to mention another mechanism that has been working in Ukraine for quite a long time already, that has managed to engage a lot of investment and to positively engage the development of the current production, is the additional incentives and premiums for the green tariff. The overall capacities for the energies that has been used this tariff as well, this 1.5 gigawatts, which is basically 1.10% of the premium, and you can see that the solar power stations, they have 1,309 megawatt. This is the 21% of overall capacities. The wind energy station do not boast the same capacities, but their concentration of the local component is 70% almost. So, which means they are mostly fully produced in Ukraine, and the small hydro energy and the small alternative energies are providing the additional share as well. And very briefly, the mechanisms that is going to continue the sustainable development of the Ukrainian renewables. There are some mechanisms that have been presupposed by the legislative level but hasn't been implemented yet. There are the mechanisms that presuppose the providing additional bonds to fill in the debts that have been created in the market till August 2020. There are some projects, and there is the draft law that presupposes that those bonds will be issued. There are some additional norms that presuppose that the state budget will allocate 20% to cover the debts with the suppliers of the renewable energy. There is additional draft law that is being developed. Again, switching the additional model for the feed-in premium, it has been discussed for a year already, and we're now collaborating with the Ministry of Energy in this direction for the development of that, and introducing the auctions that would fully give us the opportunity to switch to the market mechanisms and market regulations. Some of the mechanisms that we have already implemented, so the covering the debt that we've had till August 2020. We have already paid more than 4.7 billion hryvnias for this energy that has been used, and the regime of the compensation for the energy that hasn't been produced. The mechanism of compensation is already in place. And I also would like to say that today, as of today, the Ukrainian legislation on regulating the city construction conditions, it is outlined that the previous conditions are expiring. The conditions that have been set out till the 22nd of April 2020. So for the solar stations, they're going to get expired. So I would like to draw your attention to that because it is about those projects that have been created right now and who are getting to be launched right now. So please make sure that you're going to check out the terms of your conditions because for the wind stations, they're going to expire next year. And also, I would like to mention the level of the payments for the guaranteed buyer. So the discipline of payments is quite in a good level. So you can see the overall calculations here. Thank you for your attention. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander, for the interesting statistics and interesting presentation. The one thing that I also wanted to say about this technical conditions, yes, the 3 years, but some of the technical conditions that they have been provided under the pre-PPAs, so till the end of the 2019, so you can implement and launch your projects up till 22 if the technical improvement has been provided till the end of 2019. But if it's not speaking about the pre-PPAs, then yes, of course, when you have some certain conditions, you have 3 years to implement that, to follow those conditions, just for the people to understand that it's not like in 2022, all of the support for the wind projects will cease to be. Um, Okay, good. We have some questions, and I do hope that later on in the end, we're going to read out all of those questions. Thank you very much for being that active in our chat and in our questions. And we are now switching to the next presentation. And I would like to welcome Mr. Volodymyr Kudrytsky, who is the chairman of the management board of the Ukrenergo company that is the main TSO of Ukraine. He is the head from August 2020, and before Volodymyr has been working in Ukrenergo. He had a tremendous experience in working with other spheres and other companies of the energy spheres. He had worked in Ukrtransnafta, in Naftogaz, and other private enterprises. So today we're going to be listening to his presentation on how those capacities that Alexander has told us about is going to be integrated into the energy system of Ukraine. What is the current status and what is the vision for the future? And I hope that we'll be able to talk about the energy storages and the balancing of system. So Vladimir, are you with us? Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you, but we can't see you. I will just ask the video to be turned on. Yes, we can now see you and now hear you. Good. So please, the floor is yours. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My presentation is here. Today is going to be dedicated to the issue of how we can integrate the energy, how we can integrate more capacities to the wind. How can we integrate more wind capacities to the grid? And in the same time, how can we provide the lack or how can we provide the mitigation for these capacity limits? It's not a secret from all of you that the wind stations, the wind energy station, the solar power station, as an object with the unguaranteed capacities, they're creating certain challenges for the energy system, for the balancing of the energy system. And we need to understand for the long-term perspective what has to be done. What has to be done so that the development of the renewables energy has been in harmony with the overall trends, and so that we would turn to the more ecology-friendly energy mix in Ukraine, which means that both the wind station and the solar stations and the buildings of the new capacities has first of all I would take these generations that are being harmful for the environment, and I would take the more expensive types of generation that have more marginal expenditures. Can I please ask the Ukrainian version of the slides, please?
Е, Там є українська
So
версія моєї
there is the
презентації.
Ukrainian version of my presentation, and I do hope that you're able to see that now.
Отже, ми
Okay,
бачимо, що
so
у
what
нас
do we see
на
now?
сьогоднішній день встановлена
We
потужність
see now that the
відповідає
installed capacities of the
13-15%
renewables is slightly less than
загалом
13%
потужності
of the
генеруючого
overall installed
обладнання в
capacities for
Україні.
the generating
Я не буду зупинятися на
equipment of the
темпах
overall energy system of Ukraine.
розвитку
I'm not
цієї
going to
галузі,
go
тому
into
що
details of the
колеги
terms of
вже є про
growth
це.
of the renewables because I have heard that our
2019
colleagues from
року
the Commission has already
досить
outlined that in
великий ривок
2019 we had a very big
введення
jump
нових
with
мощностей
introduction and the installment of the new capacities, especially in the solar
Ми знаємо, що
generation. We know already
багато
that
інвесторів
many investors
намагалися встигнути
have tried
зробити
to
PPA до кінця
have tried to sign the
2019 року
pre-PPAs till
для
the end
того,
of
щоб
2019 and to
не
guarantee the
втратити
conditions so that they will not lose the
отримання високого
opportunity
зеленого тарифу.
to
Але
apply for the higher green
ми
tariff.
знаємо, що
But in
законодавство
the same
українське
time, we
воно
know that Ukrainian
зобов'язує
legislation
операторів мереж
it also provides some
приєднуватися
liabilities for the
до
network
як
and the
нової
grid
генерації
operators because
споживачів
they need to connect the new generation and connect the consumers
генерованих
under the conditions of following
генеруючими потужностями
then
певних
if
умов.
the generating capacities will follow the certain
І
conditions.
от динаміка
The
зміни
overall dynamics of the
енергетичного
change of the energy mix in the annual
бачимо, що
capacities, and you
фактично
can see
з
that in front of us right
2021
now.
року
You can see that in
прогнозують
2021, if we're going to be
на
speaking about
2023
the
у
forecast with the
порівнянні з
2021, if we're going to
2016 у
compare it
нас
with 2016,
відбувається зростання
then you can see
частки
we have
вугілля
seen
в
the overall growth
енергосистемі
of the
з
renewables in the
кожного
energy
року.
mix up till 7.5%
Але це
in
зростання
2016. But
відбувається в тому числі за
the
рахунок
growth
зменшення частки ТЕЦ
is being
500 ГК в
kept
2016 році
by the
і
decrease of the
початку
overall
2025
hydroelectric stations decrease.
року.
If you can see in 2016, there has been overall more than
Стимулює
over almost 6%. Right now, we
зростання цих
believe it's going to be
потужностей
2.7,
і
and it is
час
really
розміщення
connected to the
ТЕЦ.
growth of the
Тобто
7.5%
бачимо
share of the
фактично
renewables in the system. So right now, we can state that currently the growth
відбувається
of the renewables is being held
частки теплової генерації.
because there is the decrease of the heat
Позитивну
generation,
тенденцію
which is a
можливо
positive trend if we're going to be considering the environment and if we're going to be
до
considering
довгострокової вартості
the
енергетичного
long-term
міксу,
cost
яке
of the
дозволяє
energy
зменшити
mix.
втрати
Because as
теплової
I've already said, that the
втрати
overall
теплового
operational
генерації.
costs for the
Вони дуже
renewables
низькі, в той
are
час
really
як
low,
маржинальні витрати
and at the same
ТЗК
time, the marginal costs for the
є
heating
найвищими.
stations are really high.
Тепер безпосередньо щодо
Now,
інтеграції
speaking about the
відновлюваних джерел
integration of the
вугільної
renewables
електростанцій
and
до
the wind energy station to the
я хотів
overall
показати
system, to the
декілька
overall grid.
днів
And I would like to show you the
і
slide of the couple of our
показати, яка
working
фактично
days. And I just wanted to tell you what
спостерігається
is the maximum capacity that we have seen in the
максимальне
solar
потужності
generation
виробництва
that has
повітря
been
вільної.
our
Ми
over
бачимо,
maximum that has
що
been set out
на
and what has been set out as the
24 у
maximum of
нас
the wind generation. So you can see that we
2021
have checked the
у нас
maximum
була
capacities of at 11th of
1100
April.
ТЗК
2021, it was more
і
than
це був день
1
якраз,
gigawatt
коли
according to the
була
telemetric
обмежена
data. That was the day when we needed to set
потужності
out the
вітряної
limits
генерації.
for the capacities of
Цей
the wind
день
station because at the very that
всі
day
такі можливості
we have run out of all of these
використати з мінімумом.
opportunities
В тому році
to balance it through the
фактично
balancing
були
markets.
вичерпані всі інші резерви в енергосистемі для
And we
того,
have
щоб
run out
її
all of the
збалансувати.
reserves in the energy
Відповідно,
system to balance it.
потужності в
So we
цей
had the
конкретний
over
день, як
We
сьогодні,
have the
були
oversaturated capacities in
оператори
this day
енергосистем,
zone, and the
Укренерго
operators of the
обмежені
energy
свої
system,
місцеві
Ukrenergo, has
електростанції,
limited the
і
capacities of
обмежили
the
свої
wind
потужності теж
stations. And the
електростанції.
same time, when we have tried to control the capacities of the solar power stations as well. So we have had 4.4 gigawatts of the maximum capacity according to the telemetric data. That has been stated as well. That has been a quite significant share for the coverage of the overall
Ми
energy
розуміємо, що там
capacities graph. So we can see if we're going to have 17 or ever 18 gigawatts, and this very specific hour was the level of consumption, then we understand that now we have 20-25% of the consumption being covered by the specific hour solely by the solar and the wind stations.
Для того, щоб уникати обмежень,
In order to avoid this kind of limitations and restrictions, currently for us as for the operator of the system,
невеликий або обмежений
we
інструмент.
have a very limited toolkit
Це полягає в тому,
available
що
for us.
енергосистема
It is connected
є
to
одною
this
з
notion that
найменш
Ukrainian energy system is one of the less
і
flexible energy
там є
systems in the world.
перевантажена фаза
It is
потужностей,
oversaturated by the basic
і
capacities of the nuclear energy, and it doesn't
про що ми
have
говорили
enough the flexible maneuvering capacities. What we have been already speaking for many years, we need to build up the really flexible generation, maneuvering generation, and we'll need to build the systems for the storage of electricity. But right now, there are no new capacities, generating capacities available right now. We're only starting the pilot projects of the energy storage of the industrial scale. It has only been implemented in the framework of the Zaporizhia heating station of 1 megawatt. So right now we only have the set out of the traditional tools that are used for the balancing of the energy systems
у нас спостерігається
under the condition when
зростання частки ВДЄ.
if we see the growth
Перше,
of
це
the renewables.
звичайно ми використовуємо
Of
ГАЕС,
course, we're using the hydro generation in the day zone in order to
щоб
compensate the downfall of the
і
consumption.
ми використовуємо
And we're also using the work of the hydroelectrostations in the pumping regime so that we will increase the consumption of energy in energy system at this moment. We can allocate the overall tension of the energy stations by shifting it to the evening zone according to the dispatchers
при вичерпанні
command. If all of the other convenient and conventional tools are going to be used, we're going to be using the limitations and restrictions for the nuclear power stations. We as well can provide the command for launching additional blocks for the hydroelectrostations as well, twice a day, for example, and we can get prepared for decreasing the tension for following the solar energy activity peaks during the day.
вдавалося
At
до
this
розташування атомних електростанцій,
this year, we
оскільки
haven't used the limitations for the nuclear power station, but we basically have used all of the other tools. You know that in March and especially in April, we have had a lot of days when
енергосистема
the energy system
була збалансована і
hasn't been balanced, and we needed to
ведучі
put
потужності
additional
ГАЕС.
limitations there and put additional restrictions for the generations from the renewables. Volodymyr, you just have a minute more. Oh, okay, okay, of course, like I'm almost coming to the end. I'm just going to show you one of those days so that everyone would understand how this integration works and how this integration of the renewables should work. You can see that on 11th of April,
Досить висока сонячна
we've had
активність,
quite a really high solar activity, and you can see that we've had a really high generation by the wind station, and in the
досить
same time we
висока
had really low level of
концентрація.
consumption
Відповідно,
and a
у
really
нас
good basis for the
великі
nuclear
резерви
power station. Thus, we
великі
have
електростанції,
had used all of our
які
reserves to
там
take the attention
більше
of the
500
heating
мегаватт
stations. We didn't have the opportunity to put more restrictions than 500 megawatts for the hydroelectric stations, so we were forced to decrease the capacities of the wind and solar generation very significantly. In order not to do that, the main thing that has to be done in the long-term perspective and has to be changed in the long-term perspective, we need, with the help of the manuring generation, we need to have this opportunity to decrease the capacities and decrease the capacities of the heating generation stations. They need to have the limited capacities to give us the opportunity to cover the evening peaks of consumption. If we've had this manuring generation available, we would be able to decrease the manuring capacities of the heating generation station, and we would be able to minimize the risks of the limitations for both the heating stations and the hydroelectric station. So this slide, it'll give us the understanding of this idea that the fast and manuring generation with the help of which we'll be able to decrease the basic capacities of the heating stations, gives us more space for providing, creating the balance for the nuclear power stations that do not generate the CO2 emissions, and to include the solar and wind station into the system, which is basically the main perspective for the further on development for the wind energy balance-wise. And this availability of this new maneuvering capacity sets out additional opportunities for the construction of the new wind power stations in Ukraine in a way that we will not limit their overall production further on. And this idea, this concept has been used for the basis of our report about the statuses of generating capacities that has been forecasting 10 years in advance in what way the system should be like in this 10 years perspective. What is the energy mix is presupposed to see in 10 years ahead, and what is needed to be done in order to provide the harmonious development of the renewables and the wind energy overall. Thank you. Thank you, Volodymyr. And because of the timing restraints, let us get straight away to the next presentations, and you can ask your questions to Volodymyr in the chat. And I would like to welcome our next speaker. So please welcome Mr. Konstantin Petrikovets, who is the head of the State Enterprise Guaranteed Buyer. So please, Konstantin, the floor is yours. And we would really like to listen to what is the demand for the green energy is, and what is the vision for the guaranteed buyer on the overall trends. Do you believe the trends will preserve or no? So please, the floor is yours. Good days, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to be here as a part of this conference, and I'm really grateful to the organizers for this opportunity to be a participant of this conference. As Mr. Sisoyev has already said, my presentation is considering the demand for the green energy of Ukraine, and I'm going to open the presentation.
Як уже зазначалося попередніми
As it has already been said by the previous speakers, we currently see the overall increase of the production of the energy from the alternative sources and the renewable sources. According to the newest statistics, the overall share of the green energy in the overall energy mix for the energy generation has increased by 2 from 3.7% to 7.4% in 2020. Understanding that, there is another important question that I would like to pose, that the need for the demand to grow for the renewables, and I think you will agree with that the topic is important and relevant, because the growth for the green generation has been an important, together with the question of prices. In the framework of my presentation, I would like to provide additional attention to those issues. Why we cannot take down the green future, and what are the ways of preserving the interest toward the renewable energy sources? The $2 billion, this is the overall impact for the guaranteed buyer for our green future. More than 58 billion hryvnias have been already paid to the producers of electricity since the moment of the liabilities of the guaranteed buyer have started in increasing the renewables. Because of the state support that has been implemented by the guaranteed buyer, we have increased the overall share of the green energy and renewables in the overall production line, and you can see the overall structure and the calculation at the next slide, and you can see that this is the level of the calculations for 2020. Konstantin, the slides are not changing, it's just the first page. Just a second. Okay, now we can see the next slide. Okay, good. Yes, we can see that. Thank you. So speaking on 2020, the overall level is already 63%. We understand the overall situation that we've had last year, but currently we're doing everything in our power to stabilize the overall costs and payments and to get better in 2021. We have already paid 37.9 billion hryvnias that has already been paid. Speaking on the 2020 data, we have already paid the producers more than 20 billion hryvnias, 1.47 billion hryvnias that has been payments for 2021. And accordingly, there's going to be 9 billion hryvnias that is going to be closing the debt of 2020. Why do we have these numbers? The answer is really easy. There is a lot of debts for the guaranteed buyer. We're working on this issue on a daily basis and we're doing everything in our efforts in order to overcome the crisis of debts. We understand there are some particular challenges in implementing of the support mechanisms, but Ukraine cannot take down the idea of introducing renewables. And there are some of the arguments and reasoning that I would like to voice out about that. First of all, that there is the Paris Climate Agreement. We have been one of the first countries that have signed the Paris Agreement overall. And this, having signed this agreement, we have switched to the change of the green energy and green technology and low carbon technologies. We have approved the national plan for decreasing the CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. The second point, the CO2 emissions overall. The main partner of Ukraine, the European countries, have been currently working on the implementing the cross-border adjustments mechanisms. That means that when the goods are being exported to the European Union, the producers are going to be paying certain carbon tax, which will be depending on how many emissions you have during your production operational processes. Understanding that, we will know that our goods will not be competitive in the international markets. The third reasoning behind it is the national economical strategy of Ukraine till 2030. One of the main strategic goals for that in the energy direction is as follows: improving the energy efficiency of economy and providing the environmental friendly approach to the energy sector. The implementation of this point will require additional initiatives on decarbonizing the economy by basically increasing the energy efficiency, by growing and developing the renewable energy, by development of the circular economy, and including being included into the European New Green Deal. I think that there are additional reasonings why we need green energy that hasn't been enough. So let us get to the main point. How should we keep the interest for the development of the renewables? We need to understand that the mechanisms of the support for the development of the renewables is going to be functioning still. The classical feed-in tariff cannot exist forever, but for the effective shift of the support mechanism, we need to analyze all of the support mechanisms. We need to include additional amendments to all of the legislation and regulatory acts that are responsible for the development of the green energy. The new innovative mechanisms of support will help us to provide the interest for the development of the renewable sectors. The perspective mechanism for keeping the interest for the energy sector, we believe, are also the actions for the state support. Currently, we have introduced, there have been in the introduction of the auctions has been moving on. And I would like to say that the guaranteed buyer as the participant of this process is really interested in that. The high priority direction for the support is the sales of the green energy to the final customer, for the final buyer. The main important background for this is the opportunity to sell in the electricity at the during actions. And this initiative can be called the real breakthrough for the market. Currently, we have already sold 2 billion megawatts of energy from renewables. And as a result, we have decreased the imbalances and we have guaranteed and received the money. To keep on the interest for the development of the renewable energy is real. It's not just real, it's actually needed, understanding the challenges of the world and the time we're living through. And in order to do that, we need to update the mechanisms of support and provide the access for the responsible businesses to the green energy. Thank you very much for your attention. I do hope that I have met the time frame and I'm ready to answer your questions. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Konstantin. Yes, you've met the time requirements. Right now, we have some questions. We have some questions to our panelists. And first of all, I would like to start with the questions. First of all, I would like to welcome Mr. Kovalenko, Mr. Dmytro Kovalenko, the member of the National Council that has joined us here. And thank you very much for joining our conference. We have a question for you as well. Currently in the budget, the reimbursement for the NAC Ukrenergo is not presupposed for compensating the green tariff losses. How the Ukrenergo is going to find 18.5 billion hryvnias and why this amount of money has not been set for the tariff of Ukrenergo. Can you comment upon that, please? Yes, good day, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you for the participation in this interesting event. I have been here for the second day, and I want to apologize that I wasn't able to give you the presentation, and because we had a meeting, and I'm sure that Alexander has completed this presentation good as well. Answering the question that you have had, we have to understand that the overall treatment of the green energy and renewables energy, it is not only built by our understanding, the understanding of the clean future that we all want to have and we all are tending to. We need to understand the overall situation for the cost of the electricity that is being provided for the final customer. And right now we have to understand that the tariff for Ukrenergo that is currently zero point 0.3 hryvnias, so it's quite a serious price. It never happened before for us, and it also influences the big industry in Ukraine. And the development of the green energy and the growth of the country overall has to be balanced. And the legislators, they have come up with a decision by their legislation 80 of the ways how we can mitigate the crisis situations that we have been through last year. And what is going to be the further on trajectory for the development of the green generation? For example, on the overall sources of the finances allocated, 80% from, first of all, sales and the tariffs of Ecological, and 80% from the budget. We have set out the main amount of money in order to cover this 80% of share for the tariffs of Ukrenergo. To fully cover it, we have allocated that in budget, and we understand that according to the regulations and the requirements of the legislation, the Ministry of the Finance has also the opportunity to include those 20% throughout the budget year or find any other additional mechanisms to reimburse it. So the burden has to be only placed for the tariff. So the burden has to be allocated to the budget partly as well. So that is why what I have considered, and I understand that this issue is being discussed by the Cabinet of Ministries of Ukraine, and it has been as well considered by the Ministry of Fuels and Energy, and I hope that this issue will be resolved, because there are no other alternatives after all. And you have to understand that the tariff of Ukrenergo is not a rubber tariff, so we can develop it for only one of the spheres, but will not be able to cover all of the industry. And I also would like to add up, from what I know, there are good initiatives from the members of the parliament. They presuppose not only taking down the overall debt, but they wanted to reconsider this 20% of the component, around 11 billion hryvnias, that will be allocated in the next payment year. There are some legislative initiatives in order to issue the state bonds that will be able to cover those debts. So it's one of the options that is being considered as well. Good day. We have another question for Andriy Konashenkov. Do we have time for questions, or should we pass the next? Well, I think we're going to switch to the next session, but I do believe that all of the questions that have been voiced out in the chat, they're definitely going to be answered, and there's going to be. We really ask all of the speakers to respond to those issues through Facebook, through emails for the members of associations. We're going to be answering those questions as well. The one final question was there. There was a question from the energy reform. Please, Maxim, there is a question from energy reforms. They're really asking us to do that. Okay, and why do we have it? The final one in the chat. The question to the representatives of the council, the guaranteed buyer, the Ukrenergo, the PSO is still active till the 1st of May. What can the PSO look like after this date? What are the options that are being discussed by the ministries and government? I think there is more for the national councils on the energy regulations. Yes, yesterday we have provided the next regulations for the PSO. I think that the PSO is going to be continued as the acting mechanisms if the government has not responded to our offer to amend it. The key issues for the green energy is not going to be changed in this case. So the guarantee, there's going to be just the same. There's going to be just the same principle that is going to be left over. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So Andrea, pass the floor to you. Thank you very much, all participants, all speakers. And we'll be really grateful if you'll be able to answer these questions that we're going to send you separately from all of our participants. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and keep on following our conference. Yes, thank you, Maxim. Thank you, all speakers today. We're really grateful for you being so active and we being taking care about those issues and of how the renewables are going to be developing further on. We're ready for the further collaboration and what is the most important, so that the markets and the professional institutions would always be contacting, so we will not have the situation that we have had right now for on the payments for the producers that have already provided the energy to the network now do not have the full compensation for that. I would like to say that our international partner is the association, the Wind Europe Association. Our general sponsor is the Western, North and Central Europe Company, and we have tremendous gratitude to the Ministry of Energy and the State Agency on Energy Efficiency for their informational support and participation in this conference. We're really grateful to the UDP Renewables for supporting us in preparing the organization of it. Our professional partners, the Turkey-Ukraine Association Union for Businessmen and Entrepreneurs, the Business Get Market Platform, Energo Reform Platform, Energo Visti, and Expo Consultings. I would like to pass the floor to a very interesting expert of ours, the partner from Wind Europe. I would like to pass the floor to Guy Brinkley, who is the senior analyst for financing. And Guy is basically has started from the astrophysics. And he has been dealing for quite a long of time about the issues, how the auctions are being created in Europe and what are the financial opportunities and what are the benefits for the auctions to be held. So Guy, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I guess I don't speak so much Ukrainian, so I hope you don't mind that I speak English. I'll get on with my presentation if that's what you asked me to, for sure. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. So I hope now you can see my screen. Okay, I'm going to talk to you today about the advantages of the auction model for wind energy, in particular the contracts for difference, or CFDs, why it reduces financing costs, and the impact that has on electricity costs.
Guys, sorry for interrupting you. Please choose your channel, English, the globe at the bottom of your screen, the globe, and choose English channel because we don't have the translation.
So is that for me or for the listeners?
Okay.
Guy, please click icon interpretation and choose English.
Sorry, icon.
Interpretation and choose English.
Yeah, I'm just looking for that now.
Okay, Guy, please stop your sharing and choose English channel. Yes, and choose English channel.
Okay, I see. Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yep. And start sharing.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Sorry about that. I hope it's all clear now. So I'll go straight into it then. So this chart gives you the auction wind prices across Europe over the last few years. And there was an introduction of competitive auctions around about 2016, 2017. And we saw an immediate price drop in those auction bids. Since then, it's been fairly stable at a much lower price. And we've seen some very interesting new results in Spain this year. Now, onshore wind is the cheapest form of new power generations in many countries in Europe, particularly where the wind resource is good in the Northern Europe regions, basically. So if you're bidding low in auctions, you have to have low costs as well. Now, the levelized cost of electricity gives a measure of the cost of a wind farm over the lifetime. And this chart here gives you an illustration of how sensitive the cost of electricity is to financing costs. So on the bottom axis, this is the interest rate or the weighted average cost of capital. And you can see that the levelized cost of electricity is very sensitive to that financing cost. Basically because wind has a high upfront capital investment and you're paying off the debt over a long period of time. For every doubling of interest rate, we see an increase in the cost of electricity by about 60%. Now, clearly, in order for wind to be competitive, we want the lowest cost possible. And to do this, we really want to minimize those interest rate costs. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by financing with as much debt as possible. So debt is a much cheaper instrument to finance than equity. And so the more you can finance with debt, the cheaper your interest rate is, your weighted average cost of capital. And so how is the best way to finance with debt? Well, banks need to have revenue stability. So revenue stability is very important because it allows banks to understand that their loan obligations are going to be fulfilled, i.e. that the wind farm can repay the debts that have been lent. Our preferred method of revenue stabilization is called the two-sided contracts for difference. It's becoming popular around Europe. It's used in the UK, for example, for its offshore wind. And we heard some encouraging remarks from your acting energy minister, Yuri Boyko, yesterday about this CFD, they're called. PPAs are another way of getting revenue stabilization, but I'll describe quickly here how the CFD works. So revenues are based on electricity prices, which are variable. Now, the contract for difference provides the wind farm with a fixed price. Now, this fixed price is agreed in competitive auctions, so it represents a market price, essentially, of future electricity costs. Now, when the revenue or the electricity price is below this strike price, the government pays to the wind farm the difference. But crucially, when the electricity price is above that strike price, the generator pays back to the government. And in this way, this is not a subsidy. It is a revenue stabilization mechanism. It's possible that governments will be net receivers. And in fact, the latest round of CFDs in the UK, the government put aside no money to finance this. So how does it work? I'll give a quick example. So as I said, the interest rate is also the weighted average cost of capital. And this is calculated by considering how much of your project is financed with debt and how much is financed by equity. I've taken some illustrative figures here, which could be applicable for Ukraine, but it's just for illustration that the important point is if you're selling in a merchant environment, banks are likely to lend you maybe 25% of your upfront costs in cheap debt. So if I assume that a debt has an interest rate of 3% and equity here a return of 11%, then 25% debt and 75% equity gives us that interest rate or the weighted average cost of capital of 9%. But if you have a two-sided CFD in particular, as I said, banks are much more willing to lend debt, and you can get 75% of your project costs covered by debt. This has a significant impact. Using the same values of 3% for debt and 11% for equity, you can see here that the interest rate is 5% because 75% of it is financed now by the cheap debt. So we have almost a halving of the interest rate just by having this revenue stabilization mechanism in place. And to illustrate how that translates to the levelized cost of electricity, I ran these calculations. They are illustrative, so they're certainly not going to be exactly accurate. I've used a cost of capital for onshore wind of around about 1.3 million euros per megawatt, which is the average for Europe. And you can see that the levelized cost of electricity is 30% lower in this case because of the amount of debt that can be financed. So in summary, auction design is very important. Competitive auctions drive down costs. Revenue stability mechanisms, they are not subsidies, they are support which governments can provide, which really reduce the cost of financing. And because the cost of financing has such a big weight in the overall cost, this makes the cost of electricity for wind farms much lower and therefore makes them much more competitive. I hope that claws back some time, and that's all I'll say, but I'll be around for questions, and if you have any more, please feel free to contact me at guybrindley@windeurope.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Guy. But if we have some questions, then we will take a look at the chats. I do believe that the topic is very interesting for Ukraine right now. We will definitely be really grateful that if later on you'll be able to comment on some issues and some questions that might rise from the participants of the wind market. Thank you very much. So have a nice day. I know that you will have to leave our conference early, so we've informed everyone on that, but we still keep in contact. We do have hope that you will also have your feedback if some questions shall arise. Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And right now we would like to switch to our next speaker, Stewart, who is the General Director of Windcraft Ukraine. And we're going to be speaking on slightly different topics. We're getting slightly away from the green tariff, and we're going to talk about what is the perspective for the development of our electricity markets and in what way the market is developing when considering the conventional fuels and considering the traditional energy sources. And I am sure that Carl is now going to tell us how does he see the transition to the alternative energy sources. Carl, the floor is yours.
Carl Stewart, here from Kakhovka, southern Ukraine. Well, we were somehow the pioneers of wind power development in Czech Republic. Actually, was from the Soviet Union. The company was founded back in 2010, and the first generation started in the end of 2011. And now we have 335 megawatts operating capacity. Next slide, please. So how does the energy balance in Ukraine looks like? This is just for many of you, this is known facts, but we have about 52% of the generation in Ukraine is installed capacities nuclear power, We have a little more than 30%, 36% of thermal plants. And as you can see, we have a quite slim portion of renewable energy, only 7%. And the large hydropower plants, which belongs to the Ukrainian government, is about 5%. Next slide, please. Here we can see how the ecological effects of the thermal power in Ukraine. We can see how many thousands of tons. So we have a dust, we have the output of sulfur dioxide and the nitrogen oxides, and you can see all the negative effects of the thermal plants. Unfortunately, the thermal plants in Ukraine are basically without any cleaning, so it all goes straight out in the atmosphere. The total installed capacity is 30 gigawatt, and this 30 gigawatt, interesting fact you can see here on the left side, when those thermal plants were commissioned, and some of them were commissioned back in the 30s, so before the Second World War, and the average age of the installed thermal plants in Ukraine is more than 60 years. We can see that 40% of them were built in the 70s, 32% in the 60s. So the average age is actually 60 years, which is, we understand that those thermal plants are more than outaged, and they already depreciated for a number of times. And we understand that the efficiency is very low. We also understand that as I said before, the cleaning of the fumes is basically nothing. So to modernize them is more or less building a new thermal plants, and building new thermal plants, coal-fired thermal plants in the 2020s is probably not very modern. So the logical conclusion is that they will be outphased step by step, and then we hopefully will outphase them with replacing them with renewable energy. We can look at the next slide. We also know that the subsidies from the government per ton of produced coal is very, very high. And if you accumulate all the money that has been taken from the state budget of Ukraine during the last 30 years to support the coal industry, we speak about many $1 million. The maximum, the peak was probably in 2013, where I think the subsidies from the government to the coal industry was 32 billion hryvnia, which at that time was almost $4 billion in 1 year to support the coal industry. So tremendous amounts have been spent supporting the coal industry, which to my mind, anyway, for many reasons, will have to be outphased, not only because of the ecological reasons that I mentioned before, but also the technology of breaking the coal in Ukraine is such that it's more or less hand by manually. And if you look at the working conditions for the coal miners, it's not, I mean, from this century, it's not even from the last century, the working conditions. So the conclusion is that this has somehow to be replaced. And this is what we're discussing here today. Next slide, please. As I said, 52% of the energy balance in Ukraine is nuclear power. Out of this 52%, 2/3 has to be outphased and decommissioned by the end of 2031. So within 10 years, 10,000 megawatt or 10 terawatt of installed capacity has to be decommissioned. That is the 2/3 of the total installed capacity. And to my mind, yes, this will probably not be the case. Probably they will continue to prolong the life of those reactors. But we should know that 9 of the nuclear units has already been extended for 10 years, and 3 of the nuclear reactors in Ukraine has been already extended their lifespan for 20 years. So this process, we cannot just continue and prolong the life of those nuclear power plants. Sooner or later, we have to start to phase them out. And even if it's not going to be exactly like according to the plan, which is the approved plan of today, which you can see on this slide, this process will start. And if it's not within 10 years, maybe within 15 years, anyway, 2/3 of those nuclear power plants has to be decommissioned. If you look at the next slide. Here we can see what the trend breaking of 2020. Wonderful slide. What's happening in European Union. We can see that renewables has already passed the fossil fuels. First time it was, as I said, in last year, where we can see that the renewable energy is slightly more than fossil fuels. So this is a trend which is definitely not going to change. This is a trend which is going to continue, and Ukraine, unfortunately, is so far lacking behind this trend. We know that legislation for renewable energy, not only in Ukraine but in many European countries, has been a lot of trial and errors. There has been mistakes in the legislation. Spain, Greece, well, you can mention a lot of European countries, and Ukraine had its crisis now for the last 1.5 years. Now it's time to get back on track and understand that the fossil fuels will have, and the nuclear power will have to be faded out. And one more thing, which was maybe not mentioned in this presentation, is that if you look at the CO2 tax in Ukraine, the CO2 tax in Ukraine is about 0.5% of Sweden and about 1% of the average European Union. So, of course, the CO2 tax in Ukraine, if it will be, even if it's going to be 1/4 of the European Union level, right? We understand that those coal-fired plants, they will not be able to continue operating like today. So, thank you very much, and wish everybody a great day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carl. I am sure that your presentation is once again proving us that there's no way for us except for switching to the green energy. So the outdated technologies in any way, they're going to be economically unviable. They will not be competitive to the green energy. Thank you very much for this presentation. And I would like to pass the floor to Vitaly Sevastiano, who is the Deputy of General Director for the Wind Parks of Ukraine. This is the company that has been one of the first companies that has started the production of the modern wind turbines. And as far as I know now, that the company is now producing the turbines for 4.8 megawatts. But when we listen into Wind Europe, to our colleagues, they're always constantly emphasizing that most of the taxes and most of the monies that being included into the GDP of the European Union has been provided by the local producers. So we have to, in this case, be very friendly with Europe and support our local producers. So Vitaly, please, the floor is yours. Can you please tell us about how do you see the development of the wind energy sector from the point of view of the producer of the wind turbines? Thank you, Andrei. Good day, dear colleagues. I'm trying to share the screen as well. Yes, we can see your presentation. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So I will start, if I may. And just before I switch to the main topic, I really would like to speak about our company. This is the main company that is providing all of the wind energy. I would like to say that our company has been working starting 2020, and it has already influenced the wind energy generation with the overall project of the wind hydroelectric station. It happened because the legislation has provided the law for the implementation of the green tariff overall, and thus the production and the Ukrainian territory for the specific units and joints for the wind turbines. After that, the military action has started, but we have managed to save our team. We have decided that we'll still be sticking to the position of being Ukrainian producers, and even though the machine and construction industry has been in the downfall, we have decided that we'll be developing the construction of the machinery for the wind generation. Our company as I have already said, is providing the full cycle for the project development and ending up with the operational work with the wind turbines. We provide the maintenance, monitoring, and the follow-up of these wind turbines. The main the main holder of our technologies is the FWT Ukraine technologies. Because of the really hard work, this enterprise have provided the 70% of the localization for the production line and for the Ukrainian component in their production lines, and it was able to provide a 20% surcharge to the green tariff. At this slide, well, you can see the overall profile of our company and the equipment that we offer. Then you can see the starting from the WTU 2.0 that are placed in Kazakhstan up till the newest turbines 4.8 that has already been installed in Nikolaev district and 4.5 that we have placed in Kramatorsk, the city where we're located. You can also see that we have already installed more than 300 megawatts all over the world existing capacities. And right now, the operational management of our company and we are operating 160 megawatts. And right now gets back to the very specific topic of our discussion today. So we are providing the wind turbines on our own, and we're doing all the nacelles, we're providing the turquoise, we're providing the gondolas, the frames of the gondolas, we're providing using the Ukrainian plastics. We are creating all of them, most of the components. Those are our companies and the companies that we collaborate with. Those are Ukrainian companies that we're working with. So you can already see something that has already been implemented and what is also implementable if we have the support of the state. Um, all of the enterprises that have been outlined by the arrows at this slide are the Ukrainian producers. With these arrows, then you can see this is the specific equipment that is located in the turbine itself. And you can see that 95%, maybe except for the generator itself, will be able to produce on the territory of Ukraine by the enterprises from Dnipro, from Kramatorsk, Mykolaiv, and other cities of Ukraine. How can we do that? It always possible with the help of the balanced work of the markets overall. And right now I'm speaking about the compensation for the mechanisms of Ukrainian production, the increase of the compensation numbers, because right now the number of Ukrainian enterprises is not profitable for them to be starting to produce additional equipment for the wind turbines because of the competition on the market and the lack of opportunity to provide the prices that the European producers provide. In our mill, specifically in our turbine, the most progressive equipment is being used. The equipment that is being used on the turbines of the renowned world producers, maybe except for the J. Siemens that provides something of their own, and all of the other countries, Vestas, Nordex, they're also procuring the best equipment that is available at the market. This equipment can be as well produced in Ukraine. In order to do that, we need additional compensation reimbursement and the surcharges to the existing tariff. So, dear colleagues, if I may, I would like to in order to do that, we actually require the strong state support for even from the territory at the Russian Federation. There is the number of enterprises that have already producing the wind turbines and at the territory of the Russian Federation. In Ukraine, we're capable to do more, and we will do more if we had this connection to the green tariff and that if we had this connection to localization, that we could have scaled up our production line. It's only our enterprise that provides 2,000 of jobs at many different enterprises, providing the new jobs for Ukrainian employees. If we will increase the localization up till 95% and thus we will increase the surcharge to the green tariff, it means that the number of the jobs will be increased up till 8,000. I'm only mentioning our enterprise and can just imagine how many jobs will be if we will work with all of the other enterprises as well. As far as I remember, I had only 10 minutes dedicated for me. I just wanted to show you a very brief video. I will try to show it to you. This is the video of how the towers are being produced at our enterprise. I hope you can see that. You can turn it on. No. Um, this is the positioning. No, we can't see video. We can still see the presentation. So you can see they were welding the additional seams. We can't see video, Vitaly. We can't see the, oh, you can't see the video. Okay, I will try to do that once again. I hope you can now see the video. Okay, you can launch it once again. So, okay, we'll just rewind it a little bit. So you can see how all of the production line is being done. You can see the welding of the metal for the preparation of the towels. So all the welding works after that. These components of the towers are being connected to one another, are being welded. The holes are being made in order to provide the connection between the sections. You can see additional welding and painting of the turbine itself, the tower of the turbine. After that, there is the welding of the additional ladders, additional equipment is being placed and installed, and this is basically the ready-made tower that is being taken out of the warehouse. It's being uploaded to the track, and then it is getting to the field to be installed. And in order to do that, we have invested more than $40 million to the equipment, and I do believe that it's a very clear position from our side that we would like to have the compensation of the state for this financial investment from the investors, and so that more and more investors as our company would join the market. I'm not only speaking the Vestas and Nordax companies. I do believe that they can produce the turbines here, and I would like to welcome our colleagues to do that as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vitaly. Thank you very much. And I know that there was a question for Carl Stewart, and there is a question. Do you think that wind and solar energy will be enough to replace thermal and nuclear plants after decommission in perspective for 15, 20 years? Can we cope with 100% for the production? In both questions, Carl says no and no. And we have another question as well to the wind parks of Ukraine. What are the projects you're planning for the implementation this year? This year, what we're planning to do, we're planning to construct around 5 turbines in Mykolaiv region, and we want to implement additional capacities in Mykolaiv, and in Kramatorsk we have 3 turbines there already. In the perspective portfolio for our projects, we have the southern part of Ukraine and partly Chernobyl that we really would like to work with and to set up the first mills for this radiation zone in the past. Okay, good. So what prevents or holds back the development of the wind turbines of Ukraine? Do you have any offers for this sphere? What are your offers for that? Their offer can be only one, and maybe that's why in order to stimulate the production, it is important. It might have been very interesting for the investors, and in order to do that, it has to be profitable. And for us to be profitable, we need to increase the surcharge to the existing green tariff, the biggest surcharge that can be offered by the state. According to our evaluation, it has to be 30% or even more. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Vitaly. Thank you very much, Vitaly. I think we'll continue in our discussion, and I would like to pass the floor to Vitaly Cherkov, the General Director of the EuroCape Ukraine 1. And I do, the EuroCape Ukraine is the company that has launched their work in quite a long time ago with the help of the support of the international investment. And last year, they have almost closed their development, and they should have connected to the grid the first wind park of 98 megawatts. We really would like to ask Mikhailo whether the foreign investment, international investment influenced the development, though all the barriers and challenges Eurocape Ukraine has managed to construct the wind park, and I do believe that it's just the first part, the first stage for the contemporary wind station that is going to be with overall capacity of 500 megawatts. So please, Mikhailo, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello to everyone. Hello, Andrei. Thank you for this opportunity to share this topic. Let me share my screen. Okay, do you see my presentation?
Yes,
okay.
we do see that.
Yeah, so yes, thanks for this introduction. Really, Eurocape Ukraine has project 500 megawatt, and I think it's well-known project on the market. And as of today, we built and commissioned first phase, which is 98 megawatt. So there is 27 VTGs, GE 3.6 megawatt. We built and commissioned full infrastructure for this, including medium voltage network, 35 kV substation, and overhead transmission line, which is owned and will be maintenance by Eurocape. So current status of our project, it's green tariff obtaining. So now we are in this process, and we hope in coming days we will obtain it, and PPA enter into force. And I want to mention that some speakers already told that despite COVID, wind projects are developing, increasing, and I think we were one of these kind of project, and we joking inside that we built this wind farm online, in online mode. Yeah. So this is our location. So we are in Zaporizhia region, in Melitopol district. So about investment, basically I want to show the investment from a little bit another angle, yeah, because normally people when heard investment in the wind park, so it means like someone pays money and wind park appear from somewhere. Normally it's not like this. Yes, investment, it means that someone invest money, but then the companies inside Ukraine earn this money. And if we think from this angle, it means that like we are creating a huge network of the companies who are receive this opportunity to work with such investor. So for example, from experience of our company, for development phase, we spent around 10 million euro, and there is cooperation with more than 1,000 companies. So I simply took the data from bookkeep department just to see to which company we paid. Yeah. So for construction phase, we spend around 150 million euro, and let's say the companies which was present on site, it's around 30 companies, and there was around 700 workers on site. But this is the company only who we were happy to monitor. But if we think with how many companies they have interaction, like with the factories, with manufacturer, with supplier, delivery companies, like construction materials. So like it's huge amount of companies. And of course, these companies have their workers, they pay salaries to their workers, they pay in taxes, and yeah, and keep the company available in Ukraine. For operation phase, we will also will have some permanent operation expenses for maintenance, spare parts, salaries, taxes, and social support. So I tried to, to create this network and to show it to you, but I found that it's simply impossible to show how many companies are cooperating each other and for this project. So it's just an assumption that there is for sure more than 1,000 companies. And you know, when you see an investment from this angle, and when you start a project, normally you start with discussion with local administration, and first question they will ask you is how many workplace you will create for the local region. And normally, like, such project can create like 20, 50 working place, but it's not the right way to ask, because it's not only the workplace we create by our company, but it's huge cooperation of the company. And if we have such investment, if we have such projects, it means the companies who are providing different kind of service have opportunity to keep their companies, to earn money, to pay salaries and taxes. So there is some companies who are, let's say, renewable energy oriented, and as my colleague who previous had speech, so like VTG, manufacturing, harbors, for example, Berdyansk port, it's now a key point for vessel delivery. And if you go to the website of Berdyansk port, you will see how they're proud to deliver it, to unload, upload these wind turbines, and it's start to be a key direction of their business. There is some companies who provide oversized cargo, so like Metmast, UXO, it's very, it's unexploded ordnance. Normally you have to prepare the report and find, some bombs from World War in the area, and this is a prerequisite for receiving financing. So that's something I think only international companies and investors are requested. So that's what we receive from investor. I mean, normally we receive not only money, we receive a good experience. So normally investor, it's they provide international norms and standards, and it's very important when you cooperate with Ukrainian companies to change their habit, on this direction. And it's huge experience are received by companies who work for our project, because on daily basis we monitor them, we implement these rules and strict strict conditions from international norms. So basically, I mean, investors, it's normally foreign investors are socially oriented, and during development phase, prior construction, we already spent around $1 million for social projects. And I will not stop a lot on this topic, but we support locals with reconstruction of libraries, kindergarten, gas, water pipe, etc. And one more thing, that's with development of wind business and wind generation in Ukraine, there is a need for specialists. And for example, to our company, we received a request from Zaporizhzhia administration to provide some information because they are thinking to create an education, a specialty on the universities especially for green energy. Let's go from local to global. I think everyone knows sustainable development goals. I hope so. That's very important. And everyone knows if we not take action and not achieve these goals until 2030, so there will be some process and it will be crucial for our planet. And actually, if you can see that sustainable, it means that everything is related to each other, and by developing energy business, wind energy business, we are influenced on many of these goals. And if we go specifically for goal number 7, which is ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, we can see that mostly all of the key indicators are speak about like modern energy, renewable energy, international cooperation for renewable energy. So actually this is a way to be part of this process. Conclusion, very easy. Yeah, we are the part of this global sustainable development process, and we must continue. So that's what we are doing here in Ukraine. So by receiving such investment, international investment, we create a huge sustainable cooperation between the companies. So each business develop each other, and we are the part of global process. That's good to know. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mikhailo. We have one question for you. So the question is about the connection of the 330 kilovolt of your stations into the grid. So can you please help me also? What did they say in the chat? For just a second. So your company can consider the mechanisms of the private-public partnership for the further-on development for 330 kilovolt in Melitopol region by connecting your radial 330 kilovolt line from the wind farm to the other Ukrenergo lines for the other perspective lines belonging to the renewable developers. And so are you going to be providing the meshed and reliable grid for all? Okay, so basically the question is about creating the meshed or the, can you create the meshed and reliable grid for all? If you have understood the question, that was a very important and tax-savvy question.
Yeah, if I understand this question correctly, so basically our 330 line, it's owned by us, and so far we don't expect to share this line with the grid operator, because it's kind of a huge investment, and we I mean, again, we don't think about this yet. For sure, I mean, for the second phase, we are also take part in some grid improvement, yeah, for the grid operator facility upgrade.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mikhailo. I think that if we'll have some questions, additional questions, we're going to draw back to you, and we're going to be answering those participants' questions that have been posed and posted. So I would like to pass the floor to Mariusz Kunitskis. He has recorded a video because he has been at the very emergency meeting. He really asked us to show you the video, and basically he has sent this video in the morning to us. So can we start this video for us to be able to listen and hear how the DTAC renewables see the transformation for the green course? I've just wanted to say I have just calculated what is the installed capacities, and 33% of the installed capacities belong to the DTAC into wind energy. So when the people say and that DTAC is a monopolist, that's not the full truth. And I believe that currently we see how the wind energy is being developed in the fastest pace, and we know that DTAC is going to decrease its percentage, its share, because of this Eurocape and Windcraft of Ukraine participation and some of the other companies that are also in the market. So please, Maris, the floor is yours. So good evening, dear participants of this conference. It's a pleasure for me to be a part of it, and I would like to start my presentation was saying that it's not only in Ukraine, but all over the world, the wind generation has a huge potential. And that is something that we have already seen according to the all publicly available data. If we will consider the companies that have been providing the turbines, then we can see that the overall scales of the sales of the turbines are growing and continuously growing. So basically, I'm not going to be mentioning the investment climate in Ukraine, and do not want to concentrate on the details how the state is not paying the old debts for the green energy and for the wind energy as well, understanding that the existing support system of the green tariff is basically failed system of support, and we understand that nothing has been done from the state side in order to support the system. And so overall, I just wanted to say that it's really hard to forecast the development of the green energy in Ukraine unless we have a clear and policies of the state of what the state wants or doesn't. But that is not what I wanted to tell you about today. I have a very broad story right now on the energy systems, on the balances, and a story of in what way Europe is being developed and how Europe should develop, how Ukraine should be developing further on. I'm not speaking as a person who works in the green energy. I think that you are only thinking that I'm protecting the interest of the green energy. No, I'm actually the person who has been working in the conventional energy. I have been the head of the gas-based stations and hydroelectric stations, so I see the system overall. So if I've had this choice of how should I invest and in what way I should invest it, so any kind of logically thinking in investor, whatever you are coming from, you would have chosen sun or wind, depending on the configurations and your geographical locality. So it's not a secret anymore that there's not a single company in Ukraine, in Europe, that would invest into any other energy. Yes, there are some investments to the gas station, but it's only being done in order to support the overall stability of the system, because we do require this kind of generation in the system as well. We need a highly maneuver generation, highly flexible generation, but it all can be solved with the new technologies, as for example, the so-called storage systems. And with the help of the storage, we can resolve this issue. And any other rational person who is this moment are considering looking at their country, and they're saying that their system, that our system is now outdated, that we need additional capacities that will help our consumption. And even better, so that we will be able to export these capacities abroad. The choice is obvious. It has to be either wind or sun, because the prices for the investment and the cost for the investments are the lowest. And basically, there is no significant operational costs, because the fuels have to be bought, and this is the most natural resources. If we will consider the overall Ukraine, then we will see that our thermal stations, they're already been outdated, they're already been worn out. There is no thermal station that has been built in the recent times, and they're basically at the end of their life cycle. But we never, no one of us knows what is going to be happening after year 2030 and who's going to be replacing those capacities in the system. If we will consider our nuclear generation, then just speaking about the clear energy, yes, of course, we all understand that it is the emission-less technology. It doesn't have the CO2 emissions, and we know that for many countries in the Europe, the decision has been made to preserve the nuclear generation, but the many countries in the Europe have decided to close the nuclear power station from the very same point of view, like Germany, Sweden. We have heard those stories. But as we know, in order to cover Ukrainian consumption, we only need 50% of the generation from the nuclear power stations. If we will consider the official data of Ukrenergo, then we would see that the overall exploitation term of the station is ending starting from 2025 and 2027. We know that there will be once again the continuation of the use term for 5 or 10 years more. But after that, all of this stations have to be decommissioned and they have to be replaced with something. And the energy is not the overnight solutions. It's not the overnight investments. You cannot do that in 1 year. You cannot close down the 5,000 megawatt or 10,000 megawatts of the installed capacities for coal or the nuclear units, and you cannot replace it the very same year with some other renewables. Of course, it is a process, the process throughout 50 years when we are replacing it and replacing those capacities in order to, first of all, Ukraine in 10 years to be independent in generation and self-sufficient in the generation, and in order for Ukraine to be looking good and the European map on the clean generation. And we know that if we would like to trade energy and if we would like to export electricity to the European countries from Ukraine, there will be the issues of the origins of this electricity. So this is an important strategic challenge that has to be resolved by the government, by the Ministry of Energy. And of course, it has to be decided by the national operators and the national councils of the utilities. And of course, about the figures. According to the forecast of the Bloomberg company, if we are speaking to this 2014, the prices of the wind stations are going to downfall by 4% and by solar station by 89%. The gas stations will only see the decrease of prices of investment by 28%. If we will take a look at the prices for the energy provided kilowatt hours, then you can see that the prices for the wind stations will be twice as low as for the gas station. So the answer is obvious. So the issue is of how are we going to be stimulating this shift to the green energy. It can be stimulated into different ways. So we have been working in different traditional ways that Europe has followed as well. We've started for the feed-in or the green tariff. All of the countries in Europe, they have passed through that. They have approved this green tariff. And 20 years ago, it has provided you with opportunity to install the green capacities and develop that. Then we've shifted to the auctions. And right now we're already speaking about the corporate PPAs, which is basically procuring the green energy from the very specific station by the consumers itself. Yes, in order to get to this point, we know that there are the money demand on the market that is being created that people are saying, like, for example, we have really high green tariffs, or for example, you want the price for the support, even though in Europe the prices for the installed capacity is completely different. Yes, if you take a look at the next slide, then you will see that the average price, again, the leverage cost of electricity is 44.5 euro for gigawatt hour. So this prices in Ukraine, again, according to the external data and external evaluation, it equals 60 euro. And the main difference here, in this case, is not about the technology, it's not about the speed of wind, it's not about the location itself or the price of the connection to the grid. The main issue is the overall risk. In order to build a station in Europe, we're actually engaging the loans in Europe with a 2% of interest rates. And we have a lot of different financial institutions and banks and foundations that are ready to finance these projects. If we're speaking about Ukraine, and if we're going to be engaging the projects and financing for this kind of project, then it will be 4 or 5 times more. This is the first argument why we have this really expensive loans. And the other argument, another reasoning is that we don't have the investment attractiveness in Ukraine, and unfortunately right now, but I hope it will be resolved. So maybe investors, maybe financial institutions are ready to provide the financing in Ukraine, even under those conditions. So that is why we're never able to compare the prices of the installed capacities for the wind station in Europe and in Ukraine, just because we're living in different financial conditions compared to the other projects. And if we are considering our position right now, where we are with our price and basically the day ahead price, so we are still higher. And you can see that basically in order to get to this point, when we'll be able to produce the electricity at our station with the very same price of the installed capacity that will be more or less equal to the market prices, it still requires for us for 6 or 7 years in the development of the market. We need to stabilize the Ukrainian market. We need to make it attractive for the investment in order to receive the cheap and long-term investment for this project. But what can we do throughout these 7 years? To do nothing, not invest into anything, to decommission the old capacities and take them out of the energy mix of Ukraine, and possible to turn into the import dependence. Yes, of course, it means that we're going to be joining the ANSOE, that bringing up the capacity, so on and so forth. But I do not believe that it is the right path for Ukraine, but actually not building the new capacities and being dependent for the imported capacities in the future. So that is why this balance is the self-sufficient of generation and consumption has to be preserved. But in order to do that, this period, before we do that, we'll have to live through this period, and we have to continue in financing the green energy. And that is the task for the government, to find this mechanism, and the Ministry of Energy to how to do that, how to find it. But of course, we're not speaking about the green tariff. So basically, there are the possible auctions, the hidden premium surcharges that might be the contracts for difference, and is also the opportunity for the development of this market of the corporate PPAs. So when the customers and the buyers of the energy, they want to buy their energy from the green producers, and they're providing the long-term agreements with them, and based on that we'll be able to develop those capacities, install those capacities, and provide additional financing for the project. That can be the programs of the green certification for Ukraine, but these decisions have to be provided by the government sooner or later. In the market, there are rumors that somebody somewhere is ready to be building the projects based on the day-ahead prices, but I would like to say softly that it's not true, because as far as we know, the prices for the day-ahead markets price is connected to many different additional conditions. Is it the season, the price, the higher all over consumption level? And you know, the wind does not blow all the time. This doesn't blow the same all the time. And wind in Ukraine is not itself character. So we need to calculate this moment. We need to calculate this moment both financially and price-wise. So you cannot add up to this story right now. So joining the market with day-ahead prices is a little bit of utopic. Just to wrap up, I just wanted to say that I still believe that in Ukraine we are going to find the right decision of how we should continue and implement the wind energy, how we can do that with better market conditions, and how we can go through this 5-7 years when the price for the technology or the trust for the international partners and financial institutions is going to be more, and the prices will be much more attractive. So we're ready to participate in different discussions with our own authors. We're ready to develop the strategies and participate in the working groups in order not to stop this development trend that we have already seen in the green energy and what we have seen in the wind energy overall. Thank you very much for your attention. I want to thank Maris for this presentations. Even though we had just video, I do hope and I believe that DTEC is an important actor in the energy market, and I do believe that together we can build very nicely developed wind market. But I would like to pass the floor to Alexander Podbrugin, who is the head of the development of the Elementum Energy Company, the company that has now built 40 megawatts of the wind station in Odessa region for the Dnistro wind station. As far as I know, you're already in constructing line 2. But what is interesting that this company has entered the market when the financial crisis has started, but still the company has decided that they would like to build a wind station. So please, Alexander is here with us. So can you please tell us, how did you go? How did you come into the market? How do you see the perspectives? And aren't you afraid of all of those challenges and problems that have currently been introduced in the renewables market?
Thank you, Andrei, for introduction and for invitation for this event. This is a really great event, and I'm really happy to be a part of this discussion. Can you please switch on the first slide, the next one? I would like to talk firstly a bit about Elementum Energy, because this is a pretty young company which was established in 2018. And just in several years, very booming 2018-19 years, we've commissioned 28 solar power plants with a total capacity of 536 megawatts, becoming one of the largest renewables energy producers in Ukraine and the largest international player. It is worth to say that our solar assets are located in different regions of Ukraine, from Kherson to Khmelnytsky, from Nikolaev to Poltava. And on that construction track, through several years, we've created a very strong and professional team with a strong technical and financial background in renewables, which is now managing all of those assets. Can you please switch to next slide? Our huge advantage is our shareholder. This is VR Capital, which is an investment fund with more than 4 billion of assets under management, and having offices in different parts of the world, in London, New York, Moscow, and Buenos Aires. VR has more than 20 years of experience in investing in emerging markets. And what is important for us, it contributes and invests in Ukraine. And what is even more important, and I'm happy to say that VR is very committed to investments in renewables, and especially in renewables in Ukraine. So can you please switch to next slide? With that big portfolio of solar assets, with 28 solar power plants in the end of 2019, we've stepped in 2020 and were met with crisis in energy sector, with the payment crisis, with negotiations with the government of Ukraine, and with the high risks of retroactive reduction of the feed-in tariff for our solar capacities. Of course, with a world stock market crash, and of course with coronavirus. What was our answer for those challenges? The start of construction of our first wind power plant, of Dnistrovsky wind power plant, a 40 megawatt project with 10 turbines, 4 megawatt turbines from General Electric. That was our answer to those challenges. Today we can say that, well, with 100% of equity investment, with strict coronavirus protocols in place, we've managed to commission the project in time and on budget. And now on the beautiful and very windy, which is very important, part of Odessa region, we can have a beautiful view to our first phase of Dnistrovska wind power plant. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, 2021 met us with the same issues on the energy sector, with growing debt, with non-fulfillment of the memorandum of understanding, with coronavirus, of course. So what did we decide to do in that situation? Actually, we started the second phase of Dnistrovsky wind power plant. We've created our own project office and brought the construction management in-house. And the project office is now capable to manage and to fulfill the high-scale projects. We've procured the new era turbines, GE Cypress 5.5 megawatt turbines, and with those 11 turbines, we expect the COD in May 2022. Additionally, and that was a very tough decision, but we've acquired 3 more projects in Odessa region, aiming to participate in the auctions or on the other market-based mechanisms of investment in the wind projects. Next slide, please. So what makes us so confident to invest in those crisis situations and to start construction of the new wind capacities in Ukraine? Firstly, this is a belief in inevitability of a green transition, not only for Ukraine, but for the entire planet. And I think no one can argue that this is the only way for a sustainable future and is a matter of survival, not only for Ukraine, but for the whole world. Secondly, this is of course the high potential of Ukrainian market, which has a high concentration of fossil fuel technologies, and we've talked a lot about that today and tomorrow. And my colleagues from DTEC and Windcraft very clearly shown the need to switch to renewables. And that high fossil fuel concentration is combined with a significant renewable energy potential with hundreds of gigawatts of wind, solar, and bioenergy, which can be still built in Ukraine. And of course, we, Elementum Energy, want to be a pioneer and a leader of that transition. Of course, that is a struggle for energy independence of Ukraine. Renewables should come to replace those imported thermal and nuclear sources, and that is a matter of survival of Ukraine's economy. Of course, that is a near-term perspective of new renewable energy approaches like auctions, corporate PPAs, net metering, contracts for difference, and other mechanisms. And the evidence of our readiness to invest on such conditions is our acquisition of 3 small wind power plants, which were acquired just several months ago. Next slide, please. But what will make us more comfortable and more comfortable to invest further in Ukrainian renewables? And there is a big room for discussions and improvements. Firstly, that is, of course, the need for the long-term strategy of development of renewables in Ukraine. So we need, and Ukraine needs, a forward-looking policy framework with ambition, with ambitious renewable energy targets, because only smart and big goals can and should be the step for the Ukrainians' progress. Of course, that is a sustainable and professional, free from populism approach to solving energy sector problems. So of course, the cross subsidies should be eliminated, the carbon tax should be increased. Of course, the energy market should become open with a very limited or no manual management. Of course, government of Ukraine should honor its obligations and fulfill all of the payments in full and according to Ukrainian legislation. Of course, we need to talk about predictability and stability of the regulatory environment in order to ensure the access to competitive financing. And this was also discussed by the other speakers. So, of course, the high country risks lead to high cost of capital and high cost of energy, and vice versa. Should the regulatory environment be stable, it will lead to the lower cost of capital, to lower capexes of the projects, and of course to the benefit of the consumers who will get the cheap energy, and that will be a benefit for Ukraine and for energy producers as well. From technical point of view, we of course need the increase of the flexibility of Ukrainian grid to be able to accept more renewables, and there we of course need to talk about the batteries and the other technologies which should be implemented in Ukraine. So summarizing, we are sure that all of these measures and the other measures which were discussed today by the other speakers can make Ukraine one of the world's leaders in green transition. And of course, Elementum Energy wants to become a part of that, wants to become a leader of that transition in Ukraine, and hopefully not in a crisis mode. Thank you for attention, and I'm ready for questions, if any.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And I'm sure that if we're going to have any questions, that we're going to answer these questions. Right now, I'm not sure that we have questions to Alexander. So, by the way, Alexander, there is a question for you here.
The question is whether it is possible to achieve a high net capacity factor, which was mentioned, taking into account the possible curtailment of wind farms production due to system bottlenecks and commands to reduce generation initiated by the dispatcher control. Yeah, of course, that will be hard to achieve that net capacity factor. And of course, one of the ways to solve that problem is actually the update of the grid and the possibility to have a more flexible regulation during the day when the high generation of the wind is possible. And we hope the TSO will make their best and the regulator will make their best to achieve that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we're slightly getting out of schedule, so I would like to ask you, our next speakers, to be slightly faster, if it is possible. So thank you very much, Alexander. Right now, I would like to pass the floor to Magnus Johansson, who is a vice president of the Norwegian company TBT Ukraine. Magnus, hi, we're pleased to welcome you. So the development of the wind energy projects without investment attractiveness and the cost of the capital. This is basically what Magnus is going to tell us about. So I would like to say that the NBT company is currently finalizing the construction of 250 megawatts wind station in Sivash in Kherson region. And they are now starting the construction of the very big wind station of around 780 megawatts in Zaporizhia region, as far as I remember. There is a big question whether you'll be able to construct the station till 2022. Are you going to see that it's going to be commissioned for the next years? Anyway, would like to pass the floor to you, listen to your presentation and to your ideas about how do you see the further on development of the wind energy, considering these issues of investment and the cost of capital. So please, the floor is yours, Magnus.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Excellent. I'll try to open my slide here as well. Can you see? Very good. So yes, as you mentioned, I'll try to be brief. I'll just try to speak a bit faster. NBT is, as you mentioned, a Norwegian wind developer who has the most relevant track record being the Sivash wind project. We are about to lift the last of the 63 turbines this or next week. So that will be a tremendous milestone for us and also for international investors into the wind sector in Ukraine. The Sivash wind project is rather unique in the sense that the financing structure is rather complex, which was necessary to be able to attract all the necessary funds to build this project. We have 8 European development banks, and also including there the EBRD. And also we have with us the French Total as an equity partner. And we're quite proud that we were awarded the Sustainable Energy Bronze Award by EBRD for this project. So I'll be very brief in terms of our current process. This is just a slide that I thought worth mentioning because it shows the challenge of raising international funds into the Ukraine market. So it's rather bumpy ride. It takes quite some time. And from the start of origin of us into Sivaj until now, it's been more than 4 years. So it shows the timeline needed and the sensitivity for changes short-term in that prospect. And then to the topic that I was asked to talk about, investment attractiveness in Ukraine, I think it's worth focusing on the facts and where we are. Ukraine, as you can see from this map, currently has a very large, call it brown industry of energy production. I was rather shocked when I saw the facts up to the right, which shows that the negative effects on Ukraine population of pollution is higher than in China. And obviously we want to be part of that change of turning Ukraine from brown into green. And I think also just to have in mind, if you can see down to the right, this shows how much of renewables that are currently operating and generating in Ukraine, which is around 7%. And then in addition to the hydropower, which was there from before at around 5%. And obviously, all of this old infrastructure that was constructed during the time of being under USSR, this needs to be changed over the course of the next decade, 2 decades. And obviously, therefore, the topic of finance is very important. So where is Europe going? I will be very short here as well, because this was partly mentioned by others. The development of wind generation in Europe in general is increasing more than anything else. So probably by now, it's the #1 generating capacity technology in Europe. And as you can see to the right, during the last decade, the auction prices of these different technologies has been decreasing over time. And it's now currently plateauing at around 60 euro per megawatt hour, including for solar and wind. Although wind, because it blows a bit more than it suns in Europe, it's slightly lower still than solar. And why is this? This is a very important topic, which was already mentioned also by Maris from DTEC. The reason why renewable is booming in Europe is because it's the most cost efficient. As you can see here, for example, if people talk about building new nuclear, you can see the one to the right, it does not make sense from a purely financial point of view. Also, building a large capacity of battery is still expensive, although the price is coming down. And so basically that's why you had the 3 technologies here to the left being the main engines in Europe, which is onshore wind, solar, and then more recently offshore wind as well, which is becoming a larger technology, especially up in the Nordic Sea. And then this, I would say, is probably the most important slide in this presentation. In Ukraine, #1, it seems to me that there is a lack of understanding between CapEx and OpEx. If you look at, for example, in Ukraine right now, a lot of the electricity generation is based on nuclear, which means it is a technology which costs a lot to construct, and it's not so expensive to run. It's high CapEx, it's low OpEx. The same is for renewable technology, wind and PV. The difference being that the CapEx of the nuclear industry in Ukraine was covered by USSR, while the CapEx of our technologies is covered by current investors, and thus also Ukraine. So this is a very important difference that we need to have in mind. And on the graph down to the right, this is a figure that shows the importance of the topic of cost of capital and its impact on tariff levels. So you can see down to the right, this is the weighted average cost of capital this means the cost of debt and equity. In Ukraine right now, it sits at around 10% plus because of the recent turmoil. In, say, Germany, it sits at around 3%. And as you can see then from the figure down to the right, the cost of building new capacity in Ukraine almost doubles just because of this. Hence, the difference in tariff between, say, countries like Germany and countries with higher cost of capital. So this is why, I mean, everyone would love to build green projects at a very low cost. But when you start to add the different facts, you end up with the current dynamics that we have in Ukraine. And this is also a nice slide showing then the cost of financing around Europe. Ukraine is not here included because this is European Union. But as I was saying, the debt costs right now is probably around 8 to 10%, which depends on how you structure the projects. We are also active in a few other countries in Southeast Europe, and we can see that the benefit of having a lower cost of debt makes these technologies more, call it, cost efficient to implement in Europe. And obviously, if you see arguments saying that why cannot we build like they do in Germany, well, then you can just look at this slide and you can see what is the cost of debt in Germany. It's between 1% and 2%. And obviously, if it is between 8 to 10% in Ukraine, it shows the reality of what sits underneath all of these topics. This is an example how you can systematically think in Ukraine. It's an example from Serbia, where you actually break down the different topics of risk and you start to work down the risk, both for the equity and for the debt. This is just a way of systemically force yourself into thinking how to reduce the risk and thus also reduce the cost of new projects that inevitably Ukraine need, because the absence of installing new capacity will be shutdowns of the national grid or other technology issues. So in conclusion, from our side, the facts in Ukraine is that you need new capacity to replace old that was constructed under the USSR period. Renewable is the cheapest source when you look at CapEx. Ukraine does have a very high cost of capital. Also on the other side, electricity prices in Ukraine, they are not only partly reflecting OPEX, but they're also heavily subsidized, which means that the difference between current levels of cost and for building new capacity becomes even larger. And therefore, at some next coming years, Ukraine will still need to somewhat subsidize if they want to build new capacity because of these three topics. So the recommendation is really to focus on technology with the lowest LCOE, which was mentioned, which will be, if you look into statistics, the renewable production plus some modern gas power plants, and also systematically work on reducing the weighted average cost of capital. So that's very short from me, Andrei. I hope I'm able to reduce the average time of this overall presentation.
Thank you very much, Magnus. Thank you very much, Magnus. But we have two questions to you. First of all, so do you plan to start the construction, your works on Sofia wind farm this year? And the second question is, understanding that you are building this huge wind station, should you participate with the TSO and work with the TSO in, for example, regulating the work of this wind station and its connection to our grid, on the issue of this connection to the grid?
Yeah, question 2, number first, we have always worked very closely with Ukrenergo. So on that topic, I assume that the technical teams are aligned on how that would look. And obviously, we have so far had a very positive and fruitful interaction with Ukrenergo, and we hope to continue to have that as well. On the first question, as I mentioned, and which is also mentioned in general, It is not easy to attract international finance into Ukraine for the moment, not only because of the issues around the borders, but also because of the inability of complying with the memorandum that was signed with the government. Obviously, things are slightly improving, but it is still not a straightforward path. We are currently working on raising some international funds for Sofia, but the size of that investment is still to be seen.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Magnus. Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. Thank you very much for showing your position for the development of the wind energy. And I would like to pass the floor to our next speaker. Please welcome Yuri Zhabsky, the director of the wind farm company. Yuri, are you with us? Yes, okay, Yuri is with us. So I think that Yuri has a very interesting presentation of how you can develop the wind energy without the green tariff. And this project of this 800 megawatts that is currently being installed in Donetsk region, it presupposes the engagement of the national producers. So there will be the partly production of the components and the further on development of the big project in the Donetsk region, almost at the border with the temporarily occupied territories. Yuri, can you please tell us about your position into the further-on development of the wind energy? By the way, wind farm company has just developed their own concept for the further development, which is one of the direction, one of the visions of how wind farm companies sees that activity. In our associations, we also have the companies that have supported this concept. We have some companies that have some questions raised about that, but anyway, we are really grateful to the wind farm company for their concern about the further-on development of the wind energy and for their version of the development of the wind energy. So please, Yuri, the floor is yours. Yes. Thank you very much. Can I share this? Can I? We can see your screen. Yes, thank you very much, Andrei. Thank you very much, dear organizers, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my ideas for the further-on development of the wind energy of Ukraine without the green tariff. Unfortunately, I should start my presentation with a very sad news. Yesterday, a great patriot of Ukraine, the active promoter of the green energy, the main editor of the industrial energy and electrotechnics, Yuri Hermansky, has died yesterday of COVID. This is the person who has been a tremendous person for us, and I'm really happy to say that I have been for many years the member of the editorial board of this magazine, and let him rest in peace. But I would like to start my presentation with saying that on the 23rd of March 2020, the President of Ukraine, with the decision of the National Council of Defense and Security and Defense on the Assembly for the Ecological tragedy and the neutralization of these ecological challenges, has provided the order to the Cabinet of Ministries of Ukraine throughout 6 months to provide to the Parliament the strategy of the low-carbon development of Ukraine till 2050 and to approve the national action plan for the energy and climate change up till 2030, the national plan of the development of the renewable energy for the period up till 2030. That's a very important note. We've had a very prolonged period for debts before that for the producers from the renewables from the side of the guaranteed buyer. I'm not going to repeat myself. A lot of people have already been mentioning this issue. So that is why the development of the national plans and the energy and the development of the national generation has to consider the current situations and finding the best way to resolve that. The wind farm company sees the further on development of the energy sphere With the support and the implementation of additional support scheme, together with the auctions that will be able to provide us the project with the renewables energy on the fastest pace and be able to overall decrease the CO2 emissions, because currently they're able to Currently, we don't see the ways of engaging additional investments to the projects. We would like to offer to provide the fixed price, the flat fee for the wind generation up till the date when the new energy market of Ukraine will be launched. Up till the 1st of July 2019, and this tariff with a connection to the rate of to this date will be 5.3 euro cents per kilowatt hour. The further on development with these low prices like that will be possible because of the new technologies available. There's new technologies that are being used currently in the wind turbines that give us the opportunity to get the high quotient of the using of all of the installed capacities in the fastest pace. This support system will help us to use the auction prices that will be much lower than the flat fee for the provide them for the projects that will not be able to apply it for the auctions. The investors might also use the surcharge to the tariff by using the components for the wind turbines that have been produced in Ukraine. Thus, the following scheme is offered, the one that is going to support the further on development. The flat fee at the level of the markets based on the 1st July of 2019, a 5.3 euro cent additional surcharge for the Ukrainian components, so 50%, 6.5 euro cents surcharge for the using of Ukrainian produced components, 70% from the price of the turbine, 7.4 euro cents. What are the premises? What are the reasons for that? We have calculated it on our example of 500 megawatts. It will provide us on the level of 19-20% of RAR, the implementation of this scheme. This support, in order to provide the support, we will need to change the legislation of Ukraine on the alternative energy sources. That is quite a very good profitability and ROI for in order to engage the international investment to this implementation of this project. Understanding the ambitious goals that have been set out by Ukraine for the renewable generation, the further on development of our industry it would only be logical from the side of the government to provide our domestic production of the wind turbines that will definitely be beneficial for the economy of the country. And in order to do that, I believe that it would be the right thing to choose this opportunity that Mariupol in Donetsk region offers. The producers of the component for the wind energy that has been located, whose main capacities have been located in Mariupol, they're definitely going to broaden their opportunity on the markets of Ukraine and the market of Ukraine and the European countries, because we are closer to the main sources. In Mariupol, we have the Azov steel plant that basically creates all of the needed additional materials, all of the metal that has been provided there. Then it imports it all to all of the tower production fabrics. It has two connections with the sea, and the Azov steel has two of its ports, which gives a lot of benefits for the people who will be producing the turbines components in Mariupol. Speaking on the low carbonization and decarbonization level, it will also provide this for the all producers of the turbines to have the best benefits compared to the European countries. As the Deputy Minister on the reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories have already said, our projects of the wind station of 800 megawatts in Mariupol district has been developed and has been designed with the help of the ministry. And we're going to be using the initiatives of the ministry on the issues of the state insurance from the political and military risks. The next steps for the introduction of the systems are going to be held in June this year. We also expect that the introduction of additional support systems for the tariff support by the state also will be started this year. Our project should be implemented according to the new conditions without the green tariffs will show us one of the possible way for the further on development of the sphere. It's going to be the main driver for this development. So for these people who are going to be using these opportunities in full, just a couple of words about the project. The main power, the main figures, the capacity is overall 800 megawatts. It has 4 lines, 4 queue construction lines. It is working with the turbines of 5 and 6 megawatt each. The quotient of the usage of the installed capacity is 73%. The annual production of the energy, the brutto, is 3.1 billion megawatt hours, and the overall the ROI is up till 90% according to the tariff that is going to be introduced. And of course, depending on the scale of the usage by Ukrainian companies, our main location set is in Donetsk region, 20 kilometers to the west from Mariupol. The location is unique considering the wind resources. It has the possible consumers of the electricity, and it also has some logistics benefits. One of the most important parts of this project is using the components that have been produced in Ukraine, and the capacities of the new components is enough. The companies Nordics and Vestas, they have already provided us with their explanation that they're ready to invest these components, and this project is already at the updated stage of development, and the end of the construction is in 2021, the first generation in the second quarter 2022. You can take a look at this presentation through the Associations of the Wind Energy Assembly. I'm sorry, I'm out of my time limits. Yes, thank you very much, Yuri. We have some questions for you. So how does that influence us? How does the energy supply for Mariupol is developed? How the grid of the energy supply of Mariupol will be influenced by your wind station connection to the grid? Well, it's quite clear that as a systematic company, so we have provided a lot of calculations for these capacities and entering the grid. Of course, it has been very significant work that has been completed with all of the needed mathematical models provided for that. It all has been calculated, and for the people who are interested in this project, we do have the corresponding documents that we can provide you. So basically, maybe outside of this event we can discuss it, but it all has been calculated. The effect for the grid has as well been calculated. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think that if we have more questions, we're going to answer all of those questions in writing. But right now, I would like to pass the floor to Mykola Harasemenko, who is the head of the CL group. Basically, this is one of the most powerful companies that has been providing the best evaluations for the impact on environment. Moreover, when company has started working on those projects, they have also joined the development of the wind energy project. So today we would like to introduce you with Mykola, who's going to be telling us more about their pilot projects on the production of the green hydrogen with the help of the wind energy. That is a very relevant issue. You have heard a lot of people speaking about the green hydrogen, and Giles yesterday has said that the head of the Wind Europe has said that the clean hydrogen and green hydrogen is only possible with the usage of the wind energy. So please, Mykola, the floor is yours. Yes, good day, dear participants of the conference. Well, first of all, while I'm still turning my presentation on, I would like to express my gratitude for the organizers of these meetings. Why? Because as Andrei has already said, right now, we're not just offering the classical services, which is basically the consulting in the environmental sphere. We already have this pilot project for the development project as well, and I'm really grateful that we've had this opportunity to share our opinions with you, to share our opinions and ideas on the further on development of this project by introducing the green hydrogen production line. Our project is located Our project is located in the western Ukraine and the north part of Rivne region, close to the Dovhovole village in the Baras district. We are planning to launch 12 wind grids with 12. So the overall nominal capacity is 72 megawatts. And you can see at this very slide the technical capacities and technical characteristics of this project. They're quite high, they're quite good. So basically, we're forecasting that we'll be able to produce 207,000 megawatt hours a year, according to the calculations of the WindPro software. As of this moment, the project is like that. The developer package for the wind park has already been completed. Right now, we are at the stage of developing this line for the production of the green hydrogen. Up till now, we are calculating our main technical characteristics as well. We're really grateful to our colleagues and like-minded people from the Grasa Group and Argus company for their support in those works and in those design works as well. And currently in this stage, we are at the stage of engaging our strategical partners in order to provide additional financing for this project. This project has been launched into development in 2019 when all of the pre-PPAs have been closed and when we have been to an active phase, when we have this crisis of pain according to the green tariff prices. And honestly, we have seen the main three problems that are going to be also active in the implementation of this project. First of all, there is the continuous state support for the producers of the green energy, the problem of balancing, and of course the problem for the dispatchers by proposed limitations. Those were the three main problems that were the main drivers for the development of the project, for continuing designing and developing this project or introducing the units for green hydrogen production. So dear colleagues, we all know that we're all trying to decrease the CO2 emissions, and in Europe in July last year the carbon strategy and hydrogen strategy has been approved. The investment are supposed to be 1.4 trillion euro till 2030. For the US, that has been announced that the green energy is one of the priorities for the energy for the country, and that the US also would like to introduce the CO2 tax. And what is the most important from our point of view, that the European Union in 2023 is going to launch the cross-border carbon border adjustment tax. And in Ukraine, the issues of the decarbonization have been mostly described in the Cabinet of Ministries and Action Plan for Energy Efficiency up till 2030. We have already had with the like-minded people and with colleagues, we have had a very detailed analysis of this industrial spheres, of the spheres of industry that are going to be the most dependable when thus CBAM going to be introduced. So basically we're speaking about the paper production, metallurgy, chemical industry, the mining industries and quai industries, and that will be the oil and coal processing factories. Speaking on our projects and our idea, considering the geographical location of our wind field and understanding the limitation for the main capacity, 72 megawatts, we have understood it clearly that the main product and economically profitable product from our complex would be the creation of the hydrogen, the green hydrogen. So we have had a research according to this industrial sectors that will be influenced by the CBIM, and we have analyzed the closeness to the main industrial objects and providing the connection. We have understood that Rivne Azot enterprise might be the main end user of our products. Speaking on the products from the enterprise itself, it's a very huge enterprise. The main idea is that this enterprise is creating the liquid ammonia components. This enterprise also exports this product to 40 countries from all over the world and in the European Union countries as well. So at this very slide, you can see that the growth of the ammonia production is also correlated to the growth of the population of our planet. As you know, the population grows. That is why the nitrogen-based fertilizers, they are increasing the fertility and the level of the harvest as well, and the level of yields by 2. Speaking all the nitrogen, so the ammiac are basically the best capacity for the nitrogen that is going to be providing this opportunity to be stored for more than 300 kilometers length. So we are just having it's 6 times more than in the liquid up to 220 atmospheres gas-like states. According to the evaluation up till 2030, the world market of the green nitrogen is going to be rising from $11 million for 2020 is going to be growing by 300%. We have analyzed and we have seen that the overall issue of the production of the new green nitrogen and X-based technologies has been a popular issue from all over the world. It has been working for many days already, for many years already, and you can see the short list of all of the enterprise involved in that. Speaking on the future costs, if the natural gas is higher than $5 and the carbon tax, which is €50 per 1 ton of the CO2 emissions, then the overall price of the production of the NX base is going to be lower. So you can see the green NX base components will be as well provided it will be dependent on the scale of the production line, which is a natural connection. But under the connection, that the cost of the energy is going to be between 20 and 30 megawatt per hour, then the cost for NH3 is going to be still $340 per ton. What is the economical effect for the introduction of our project together with the unit for the green hydrogen production? Well, first of all, we have to understand it clearly that the geographical location of our wind farm and all of the additional moments for having the additional capacities for the liquid, for creating of the further on the usage for the hydrogen, for the further on creating ammonia and nitrogen-based fertilizers, it will be basically very positive impact. The most thing that is really influencing our calculation is the level of uncertainty. We have to understand that according to this point, we can actually turn to the market conditions without any connections or dependencies with the green tariff at all. Then it will definitely help us to diversify the national grid and network. It will give us the opportunity to broaden the wind farm, because then again we're going to have increased the taxes to the Ukrainian budget, and we will engage additional investment. What is the economical effect for Rivne Azot's enterprise? First of all, it will be the environmental impact, the decrease of the CO2 emissions, and thus there will be the decrease of the ecological tax according to the Ukrainian legislation. They will also help you to diversify the dependency of this enterprise to the cost of the natural gas that is increasing constantly, and it will as well decrease the cost of the products to the European Union market concerning the new CBAM measures that will be introduced. That potentially mean that by introducing the green hydrogen to the technological process of this enterprise will be able to have more access to the European Union markets. Thank you very much for your attention. You can see my contacts on the screen. I'll be happy to contact you. Yes, thank you very much, Mykola. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. It has been based on facts. Thank you very much for that as well. But right now, I would like to pass the floor to the cherry on top of our presentation. This is the presentation for the concept of the White Book on the development of the offshore wind power. We have Katarina Knish, who is the author of this document, and the co-authors, Marta Halabala. They represent the Astas company that has analyzed all of the legislation in Ukraine and what is needed in order to develop the offshore wind energy. And by the way, the offshore wind energy is being oriented for the production of the green hydrogen as well. So please, Katarina, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for the introduction. So dear participants, it is a great pleasure for me today to introduce you with the new levels of the economical development of Ukraine and show you the potential of the offshore wind development in Ukraine. So, Ukrainian Wind Energy Association has initiated the creating of this white paper on the offshore wind power development and the green hydrogen production in Ukraine. We were helped by one of the members of the Ukrainian Wind Association, the Astas legal company. This legal company has been joined by the Ukrainian Hydrogen Council, and later on we have been joined as well by the Renewables Energy Institute in Ukraine, and we have all created the white paper together, the one that is going to be, I hope, the first step for creating the national strategy for the development of the offshore wind energy in Ukraine. Next slide, please. So the research of any kind of the unknown issue starts with the beginning of this research, and our work is still started the same way. So we've started the development of the offshore wind energy with its beginnings. For all of the countries, the offshore wind energy is the logical next step for the development of the wind energy sector overall. Because as the Dutch saying says, the one who's mastering the wind is mastering the future. So the main leader for this wind energy is Denmark, that in 1991 has launched the first offshore wind station in Windby with the overall capacity of 5 megawatt. It has been made of 11 wind turbines overall. After 26 years of exploitation and generating the green energy, the station has been decommissioned. It has been taken down because the offshore wind technology is being developed, the technology is being developed, so everything moves forward. 20 years have passed, as you can see on the graph, and in Europe, we have already built 2,946 megawatt of the offshore capacities. The offshore energy in Europe, 20 years after the first offshore wind station has been launched, has generated 10 terawatt hours of energy for green energy for European countries. Since that, in 2010, the offshore energy has surpassed the limits of European waters and has started to be launched in China and the US. The wide development of the offshore wind energy has been started since 2014, and basically till the end of 2013, the market of the offshore wind energy decreases by 24% annually. In the end, please next slide. By the end of 2020, the offshore wind energy reaches the 32,000 megawatts of the offshore wind capacities. So, as of today, in Europe, in Asia, in the US, the green energy is being generated by 162 offshore wind stations. Just last year, that has been a record year for the offshore wind energy. The world has launched 5,200 megawatts of new capacity. So 20 years after the first wind offshore station has been launched, the leaders of the offshore wind energy are the UK, Germany, China. And you can see China is basically really going hand in hand with Germany in developing the energy. You can see the Netherlands and Belgium closing up the top 5 list. Europe is the main market for the offshore wind energy. The overall share of the offshore wind market of Europe, the overall share of Europe in the overall offshore market is 75%. So speaking on the strategy for European Union for the development of the offshore wind energy, Europe plans till 2030 to build 60 gigawatts of the offshore wind capacities, and up till 2015 they're planning 300 additional offshore stations. It sounds like important ambitions and important indicators as for me, and Ukraine should be looking up to those countries as well and to keep on developing the offshore wind energy. Why? Because we have the good potential to do that. And one of the most important assessments for the potential of Ukrainian offshore is basically the research for the bank, because the potential of the Black Sea and the Azov Sea is basically 1,000 gigawatts of the offshore capacities. And the only problem with this research is that the World Bank also considers the currently temporarily occupied territories. They're also considering the Crimean Peninsula and all of the waters surrounding the Crimean Peninsula as the Ukrainian offshore capacities as well. So if we're going to be developing the offshore energy according to the research of the World Bank, we have to consider this political context as well. But in our work, we have decided to take a step further, and with the support of the work of the Institute on the Renewables Energy and the Ukrainian Hydrogen Council, we have calculated the technical capacities for Ukrainian offshore regulations. It is seen at the second map. And according to this data for the National Lab for the Renewable Energy of the US, the overall area that might be used for the shallow waters if the offshore capacities is around 146 gigawatts. The Institute of the Renewable Energy has even go further. They've calculated most of the indicators, and they have concluded that if we're going to be considering the waters of Azov and Black Sea, the Sevash and the Dnipro cascade, and all of the waters that we have, we will receive additional 250 gigawatts of technical capacities for the development of the offshore energy in Ukraine. Considering the average quotient of the installed capacities for the offshore wind capacities, more than 45%, we have calculated the potential capacities, the potential output of the green energy by the offshore power stations. And it's now on the level of 984 million kilowatt hours that can be generated by the offshore wind station that can be built in Ukraine. As far as our white paper is not a concept, it's just as the white paper. So this is the very first step for creating the concept for the development of the offshore wind energy. It's quite clear that even our calculations, they have shown significant benefits for the development of the offshore wind energy in Ukraine. First of all, we're speaking about the reduction of the CO2 emissions. We're following to the Paris Agreement liabilities, and we're speaking about the energy independence of Ukraine, because due to the offshore wind energy that is potentially more powerful than the onshore wind, we might become fully independent from the imported fuels. Of course, we're speaking about the additional development of the low carbon and non-carbon neutral technologies. We are creating the new jobs, and we're creating significant investment and significant money for the state budgets. And of course, the offshore wind energy is a platform for yet another market in Ukraine, creating the new market for the production of the green hydrogen. For example, one offshore wind station with only 1,000 megawatts capacities can generate enough green hydrogen to provide the heating for more than 1,000 households. So basically, even this calculated measured capacity has already shows how powerful Ukrainian energy system might be by using this opportunity. And we would like to mention and remind you that the Ukrainian Wind Energy Association also works as an analytic organization, as a market researcher as well on the highest level. Every year, we're preparing our annual reports for the development of the wind power sector in Ukraine. And this year, we have also published the first children book, The Secrets of Wind, the book that has been created in co-authorship of the board's members for the Ukrainian Wind Energy Association. So please track up our updates. Talk to us. We're ready for your feedback and ready for the collaboration. And I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Marta Halabala, who is the representative of the Astas legal company, who has been leading the work in analyzing the national legislation for the development of the offshore wind energy. So please, the next slide. And Katarina, thank you very much for a fascinating presentation. Andriy, I'm also really pleased to see you as well. Thank you very much for making me a part for the development of this white book that has been created with the support of the Astas legal company, who is the #1 leading company for the energy issues in the legal sphere, that has been created together with the Ukrainian Hydrogen Council with the support of the Institute for the Renewable Energy of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine. As Katarina has already said, the white paper is the first step that we have made in order to describe the situation with the offshore wind energy in Ukraine. It has been a very interesting experience to work on the certain notion of the legislation that might be and might appear through the implementation of the wind projects in the offshore. As Katarina has already said, when we have conducted this analysis, the first analysis has been conducted based on the technical evaluations of the World Bank and based on the research from the National Academy of Science of Ukraine. But I wanted to present you with the legal analysis as well. So we have provided the evaluation of those legislation gaps that are needed to be covered so that the development of the wind, of the offshore wind projects would be, not to say perfect, but would fit the minimum requirements in order to start this development of those projects in Ukrainian waters. The next slide, please. So, I'd like to start the presentation with the overall legislation base. As far as you know, in 2018, there were the new legislation for the transmission system code and the distribution system code by the National Council, but this acts that has to regulate the issues of the connection, the regulatory questions, they do not have the specific provisions that would be corresponding to the issues of the offshore. So thus this provisions, the lack of this provision is something that we would like to see in the next additions for this national councils provisions, and Astas are ready to support this in the project. And I'm sorry, there is Vitaly Sebastiano, please, can you unmute your microphone, please?
Vitaly Sebastianov.
Thank you. Can you please turn your mic off? You're actually bothering the conference.
Отже, ми були б раді включитися в підготовку більш детальнішого законодавства України, зокрема в нормативно-правові акти, які регулюються НКРЄКП. Крім того, в регуляторній базі ми би хотіли бачити правила прокладки мереж, які були б прокладалися на морському дні, тому що, як вам відомо, технічно приєднання вітрових установок між собою та з підстанціями, а також сушою, є іншими, ніж на вітрових електростанцій, які знаходяться на землі. Крім того, хотілося б додати в повноваження операторів відповідні повноваження, які стосувалися б оператора системи розподілу і оператора системи передачі. Також потрібно, ми проаналізували, що може бути певне накладення дозволів, які потрібно отримати для реалізації такого роду проєктів на морському дні, і, відповідно, для того, щоб уникнути питання дублювання цих дозволів, потрібно пропрацювати наступне законодавство. Наступний слайд, будь ласка. Отже, також ми проаналізували питання охорони навколишнього природного середовища. Хотіли би зазначити, що території, на яких можуть бути реалізовані офшорні проекти, вони не є законодавчо визначені. В інших країнах готують так званий просторовий план, морський просторовий план. Власне, вибір таких територій для вітрових енергетичних проєктів на морі залежить від результатів стратегічної екологічної
But they really depend on the strategic and economical evaluations and the evaluation of the interest that might be violated in case of this offshore stations should be built. There's also the issue of protecting the biodiversity in the seas. There are additional issues on the regulations for the sea transportations to be provided for the specific traffic for the sea transportation. There will be additional bodies should be created to provide the environmental impact assessment, because there are different peculiarities than the construction of the wind farm onshore. And we know that this kind of evaluation and kind of assessment is an important procedure for any kind of construction to be planned. Moreover, the law of Ukraine on the environmental assessment and the strategical and environmental assessment has to identify the order and with which the public is going to be participating in the implementation of such projects at sea. Next slide, please. On the regulation of the issues of the land use, as far as you understand, we will not be able to discuss the issues of the land management regulations, because we're speaking about the usage of the land of the seabed and the maritime land. So there are not the land use management legislation is not be used for the seabed management. So there are different issues of the interconnections for the windmills and windmills with the substations or in the offshore wind stations. But for this, they sometimes use the interconnectors and the charges that being placed on the seabed. And we understand that the right to use and manage the seashore, the seabed land is being done through the rent. It is the only possible option, because there is no opportunity to choose, there is no opportunity to choose to buy the seabed. And the other issue, that is the issue of the substitutes. When you are understanding that we are renting out the landlord for construction, there is no specific regulations of how do we state our servitudes are underwater. So we have to build up the institution of the servitude, but we don't have the clear regulations on the servitude notions underwater. Next slide, please. Speaking about the construction norms and the land use overall, that is as well an important issue. It hasn't been identified clearly. We didn't have this opportunity to identify the specific target of use for the construction of the offshore wind station. And there is no opportunity to assign the key target use for this land lot that will be allocated under the seabed. there is an issue. There is no opportunity to obtain the search and permit for the construction because there is no procedure for the offshore wind station. It's not presupposed by the legislation. So thus the order for the construction, it presupposes that you will have the urban construction documentation, which is actually means additional obstacles, additional challenges when we're speaking about the offshore construction. We do not have the specific legislation body that that is responsible for complying, for providing the compliant assessments for the construction and designing documents, and who's going to be conducting this expertise if this expertise is going to be needed. Then there is also, there is no requirements for the construction. There's no construction requirements, and they're not included. The construction on the seabed is not included to the state regulations on construction. We know that it has to be environmentally and technically evaluated and assessed. That is being done before there is the permission for the construction provided. But unfortunately, those steps are currently unavailable as far as there are no technical regulations on these issues now. Speaking on the construction norms that the developers might face during the construction. First of all, there is the lack of the relevant state construction norm for the project design of the offshore wind power plants. The most important requirement is for that all of the project and design documentation will be referring to the state construction norms. So the lack of the state construction norms causes additional challenges to receiving the permission for the construction. And what we believe that the construction of the most challenging objects they all have to be licensed. As far as you know, this kind of objects has to be licensed, so that we'll have to obtain the permission for the labor services ministries as well, and it would require additional amendment to the legislation. We offer to prepare a separate draft laws, a separate legislation that will follow the EU Directive 2018/99 on the maritime planning. This kind of legislation has already been developed in other countries, especially in those countries, as Katarina has mentioned, the countries that are the top countries in the overall offshore wind generation countries like the UK or the countries of the European Union. There are some norms that we can already borrow from their side. Whether it will be possible to offer to borrow it in Ukrainian legislation, it depends. There are other moments as well, the other moments of the technical exploitation of the stations on how there will be exploited and how there will be additional equipment allocated. And as an overall comment, I would like to say that we should start with the overall legislation, with the framework legislation, on the change of the legislation on the alternative energy sources that should constitute the certain regulation norms and rules for the implementations of the green legislation and some certain stimulation norms for the alternative resources. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Martha. Thank you very much, Katarina, for this work. And I do believe that there is a high perspectives for the work of the wind or the offshore wind energy, especially if it's going to be connected to the green hydrogen generation. Thank you very much for your participation. And I would like to say that our general main partner, Wind Europe, and general sponsor for Western, North and Central Europe, we would really express our gratitude to the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine, the State Energy Efficiency Agency, the members of our associations, the UDP Renewable, and our informational partners, the professional associations of environmentalists of Ukraine, Turkey, Ukraine Union of Businessmen and Entrepreneurs, platform Get Market Platform, and Electrovesti, Energo Reform, and Expo Consulting. Thank you very much for participation. I do hope that this conference has brought a lot of new information to your attention, and I am sure that this is the start for the development of the normal roadmap and the strategy for the further on development